Chapter 80. Just as Ryuto had thought, this group of people who set up a financial company to collect debts and swindle people were just a bunch of punks. Moreover, after they left their original gang, in order to avoid paying tribute, they definitely didn't dare to tell their original gang what they were doing. They could only use the name Rulon Group to fool outsiders. Therefore, when they found out that the young master of the Rulon Group was standing in front of them, it was easy to imagine how they felt. However, these people in the business of collecting debts and swindling people really made a lot of money. Ryuto casually took over the gunny sack that contained the man in the suit and quickly counted the money inside. There were bundles of $10,000 bills, adding up to a few hundred bundles. The amount here should be no less than 5 million. If the deed for the office was included, then this amount of money was indeed not small. Of course, in the suit man's opinion, this amount of money was worth it to buy his life. If he lost his money, he could earn it again, but if he lost his life, then it was over. Take this guy outside and deal with the transfer procedures with my partner. Then take your men and scram. Ah, yes, yes. After hearing Ryuto's words, the man in the suit finally let out a sigh of relief, because this meant that his life was finally saved. Speaking of which, making money like this was pretty easy. Why not start a new business of black eat black? When the man in the suit happily ran out and prepared to deal with the transfer of the office contract with Sensible, Ryuto silently thought while counting the money. The Rulon Group definitely couldn't casually do things like black eat black. Even if it was a punk without any background, if it was done too often, it would cause public outrage. After all, once or twice was fine, but if Ryuto went out every day to rob and extort other people, then it would only cause disgust and anger. At that time, no matter how powerful the Rulon Group was, they couldn't avoid it. Moreover, the Rulon Group had always prided itself as a chivalrous man. If his father found out that his son had been robbing others, he would probably be so angry that he would break out of prison and beat Ryuto up. However, even if the young master of the Rulon Group, Ryuto Kiryu, couldn't do it, it didn't mean that Ryuto himself couldn't do it. As long as he didn't reveal his identity when doing this kind of dirty work, then no one would know that it was Ryuto who did it. That would be fine. For example, wearing a Batman mask in the middle of the night and then going out to punish evil and maintain the peace of Tokyo, this is a matter of course, right? While Ryuto Batman might do some cute little tricks like extortion while punishing evil, but probably no one would care. It was decided that he would go out and rob someone tonight. After counting the money, Long Do found that there was a total of 25 million yuan in the sack. A happy smile appeared on his face. After purchasing 2 passive skills, Ryuto's little treasury only had the extremely auspicious number of 44 million left. But after obtaining the man in the suit's entire net worth, it suddenly soared to 69 million. He was rich again in an instant. It felt like a needle poking through a needle. Knock, knock. Just as Ryuto was enjoying his spoils of war, Gao Yuan knocked on the door and walked in. As expected of a real professional, he got a sum of money and a base of operations so easily. Looking at Long Do, who was sitting behind his desk leisurely counting money, Gao Yuan really felt like prostrating himself in front of him. It had only been about 5 minutes since the three of them entered Conscience Finance, and everything was over. Moreover, Long Do was the kind that beat people up as soon as he came in. Even so, the other party still had to obediently hand over the money and the deed, and then obediently carry their unconscious companion away. Was this the power of an extreme Dao expert? Ordinary hooligans were like ants in front of him. Seeing Ryuto quietly put on a show, Gao Yuan made up his mind to make the Rulong Security Company flourish and squeeze all the money out of the rich. I'll change the company's name and scope of business in a while. I'll also open a company account. Of course, I'll arrange for a few stand-ins with clean identities to stand on the surface. The three of us and the Rulong Group don't have to be involved. Speaking of which, Ryuto, Gao Yuan and Sensible's identities were very sensitive, and it wasn't convenient for them to appear publicly in various materials. However, Gao Yuan had been in the business world for so many years, so he naturally knew all kinds of tricks. For example, he could use stand-ins to deal with the legal person and person in charge of the company. All he needed to do was spend some money. Oh yeah, after opening the account, how much money should I transfer in? When Gao Yuan seriously talked about setting up the company, Ryuto suddenly remembered that the company needed a startup fund. Renovation, personnel expenses, equipment purchase, utilities, social relations, etc. If he calculated carefully, it wasn't cheap to set up a company. There were many things that he had to spend money on. Although the money was technically in the public account and should be paid by the Rulon Group, Ryuto knew that the Rulon Group was also very poor, so they probably couldn't fork out much money. If it really doesn't work, then I'll have to pay for it myself. Looking at the sack of money on the table, Ryuto showed a reluctant expression. Unexpectedly, Gao Yuan shook his head and said with a smile, "The first fund is expected to be injected about 100 million yuan, but this money doesn't need you or the Rulon Group to pay for it." "I'll pay for it. 100 million? Wait. How can I let you pay for it? This is public money." "It doesn't matter. Just treat it as my investment. Anyway, I have no place to spend my money." Although they were discussing the flow of money in hundreds of millions, Gao Yuan's tone was still very calm. After all, he had helped other companies for so many years, and he had a lot of money on hand, and Gao Yuan himself wasn't the kind of person who liked to spend money. Compared to spending money, he preferred to earn money, and the more money he earned, the better. At the same time, Mingji walked in with all kinds of signed documents and started to discuss some of the legal issues involved in the transfer of the company. So this feeling was really magical. Half an hour ago, they were still discussing the establishment of the company in the coffee shop, and half an hour later, they were already doing it. Gao Yuan was a genius in the business world, and Sensible was an official undercover. With the two of them, many things were naturally not a problem at all. Next, as long as the Rulon Group sent people over, they could officially start the operation. When thinking about how many brothers to send over in the first batch, Ryuto suddenly discovered an important problem. Wait. I don't seem to have discussed with Uncle Fujiki about setting up a company to make money, right? Thinking of this, Ryuto couldn't help but scratch his head. Chapter 81. Although Tongshang Ryudu had the most say in the Dragon Group and had become the young master and second-generation leader in many people's eyes, Tongshang Ryudu still had a lot of power. But in fact, he wasn't officially in position, and even if he was in position, many things had to be discussed with a consultant before he could start. He couldn't act on his own. In particular, Fujiki Yoshio, the old consultant, was one of the subordinates who had followed Tong Seiichi for the longest time, so Ryuto had to ask for his permission. So after returning to the Rulon Group headquarters that night, Ryuto found Uncle Fujiki and explained his plan to him. From meeting Gao Yuan and Sensible, two young and promising gods, to establishing the Rulon Security Company, and how to quickly squeeze money out of it. During the process, Fujiki Yoshio didn't say a word, he just silently smoked his tobacco pipe. The uncertain expression on his face made it difficult to figure out what the consultant was thinking. "Uncle Fujiki, what do you think?" After he finished, Ryuto looked at his expression and asked in an uncertain tone. In any case, Ryuto must convince Fujiki. Only in this way could this matter proceed smoothly. A few seconds later, Fujiki sighed deeply, put down the tobacco pipe in his hand, and asked in a vicissitude tone, "Young Master Ryuto, what do you think Extreme Do is?" Ryuto was silent for a while, then said firmly, "It's a group that is not accepted by today's society." In Ryuto's view, Extreme Do was a group of people who were exiled by society and could only live in the dark. It's the opposite. But Fujiki shook his head and smiled. It's not that Extreme Do is not accepted by society, but that the people who are not accepted by society form Extreme Do. Although the two of them were stating the same fact, the meanings they represented were completely different. In the view of ordinary people, because Extreme Do became Extreme Do, it was not accepted by society. However, from the very beginning, it was actually a group of people who were not accepted by society and went against the country who chose to huddle together for warmth, thus forming the source of Extreme Tao. There were many people who were out of touch with society and were not allowed to exist by the country, and there were many reasons for that. One of the main reasons was that he was disappointed in this rotten country. In the eyes of Fujiki and the other older generation of Jidao, Japan was a country with a broken backbone. From the top of the government to the bottom, they were all a bunch of dogs with broken backbones. When Tingmu was still very young, something like this happened to him. At that time, Tingmu was taking a tram to travel somewhere. There were a few tall and strong white men on the tram. They spoke fluent English and were shouting loudly without restraint. Tingmu, who couldn't stand the noise, stepped forward to stop them, but he was besieged by the strong men. In front of the hundreds of people on the bus, those strong men gave Tingmu a solid beating and even spat on his face. However, everyone around just hid far away. They didn't even dare to breathe, let alone stand up for Tingmu. Originally, Tingmu was beaten and his skills were not as good as others, so he accepted it. However, what really made him go to extreme do was what happened later. On the tram back from the trip, Tingmu saw a few other thin and weak young people also gathered together to make a noise. However, this group of young people didn't make a noise for long before the passengers on the surrounding trams besieged them, accusing them of breaking social rules, having no morals, no family education, and so on. From that moment on, Tingmu understood everything. The residents of Japan were like defeated dogs with broken backbones. When they met people who were weaker than them, they liked to straighten their backs, stand tall, talk about rules, morals, and other things to show their status. When they met people who were stronger than them, they didn't even dare to breathe loudly. When they were stepped on, they didn't dare to make a sound. They chose to lower their heads and pretend that the feces on their heads were leftover curry. This was not a matter of one person, but the situation of the whole society and the whole country. The mentality of bullying the weak and fearing the strong was engraved in everyone's bones. Therefore, there was a need for extreme do, a need for this kind of tough guy who would not compromise with the strong and the powerful. In this abnormal country where everyone else lives on their knees and is proud of being enslaved by the strong, we extreme do are the only people who are standing because our knees are stiff, and we are born unable to kneel. Speaking of this, Tingmu reached out and patted his knees while sitting cross-legged. The standard sitting posture in the Rulon group was always cross-legged. Kneeling was not allowed. Because everyone else in this society was kneeling, extreme do could not kneel, so the Rulon group could not kneel. This principle was understood by Ikima, Tingmu, and thousands of brothers. However, at this time, Ryuto said that he wanted the Rulon group to be engaged in some kind of security work. Wasn't this the same as being a dog for the rich and powerful? It was because they didn't want to kneel and be a dog that extreme do was exiled from society. If the price of making money was to turn back and be a dog, then it was better not to earn money. Although Tingmu didn't say it explicitly, his expression and tone clearly meant this. After feeling Tingmu's firm will, Ryuto didn't know what to say for a while. The Rulon group was a place for those who were not accepted by society to stand. Even if they were condemned by everyone, even if they were poor, they had to continue standing until the moment of their death. If even the Rulon group became a dog for the rich and the bureaucrats, then the last trace of benevolence in this country would disappear. Therefore, Tingmu didn't support the Rulon Security Company, because he didn't want to earn money. What should I do? For a moment, Ryuto didn't know how to persuade Tingmu. After all, this man's will was still relatively firm. If only Lioli was here. She was smarter, so she would definitely be able to be smarter? That's right, I can do that. Just as Ryuto was thinking about how to persuade him, he suddenly thought of the reason why he wasn't smart. In the end, all of Ryuto's previous actions seemed to be unfathomable and planned, but in reality, they were all built on a full understanding of this world and other people. It was an open-book exam. In terms of true wisdom, Ryuto was currently at the level of wisdom, mortal scraps. At most, he was at the level of a normal person. What should he do now? Naturally, he had to upgrade his wisdom. After all, he had just received a sum of money not long ago, and his wallet was still relatively well off. Therefore, Ryuto immediately opened the system and entered the familiar attribute upgrade interface. Upgrading from LV1 resourcefulness to LV2 resourcefulness requires 5 million yuan. Are you sure you want to pay? Upgrading from wisdom to wisdom also required 5 million. It didn't feel like it was worth it. Forget it. After spending 5 million to upgrade wisdom on the spot, accompanied by a faint light, Ryuto's brain felt a lot clearer. How should he describe this feeling? It was as if Ryuto's brain was filled with paste. Now that the paste was cleared, his thoughts gradually became clearer. Chapter 82. At the end of the day, what Fujiki couldn't accept was that the Rulon Group was working as a security guard to protect the corrupt higher-ups and the profiteers who exploited society. But what if the Rulon Security Company wasn't set up to protect them? So that's how it is. Is there such a clever way of speaking? After his wisdom was upgraded, Ryuto, who now had the LV2, Wisdom, Excellent Passerby level of planning ability, thought for a while and thought of a way to persuade Fujiki. At this time, Fujiki saw Ryuto closed his eyes and didn't say anything. He thought that his rejection hurt his self-esteem. Young Master Longdo, I can understand that you want to start a new business, but there are some things that you can't rush. The middle-aged man tried to persuade him. By the way, Uncle Fujiki, have you raised pigs before? Just when Fujiki was about to use his experience to talk a few principles to dispel Ryuto's idea, the latter suddenly said something very strange. Raising pigs? Why would I raise pigs? Fujiki didn't understand for a while, but he still shook his head decisively. Then do you know how to raise pigs? I have a rough idea. It's nothing more than letting the pigs eat and drink until they are white and fat. Finally, the pigs are slaughtered and eaten. Yes, and in addition to letting the pigs eat and drink well, you also have to build a safe pigsty for the pigs and let them slowly fatten up in it. That being said, what does raising pigs have to do with what we are talking about now? Of course, because the Rulong Security Company is like a safe pigsty, and we are the pig farmers. All the dignitaries and rich people who are served by us are the pigs in our pigsty waiting to be slaughtered. When saying this, Ryuto's face showed a strange smile, as if he was a villain who was planning something bad. Of course, in fact, he was indeed a villain, but this villain didn't take the money of the common people, he took the money of whoever had money. Dignitaries and rich people. Are the pigs in our pigsty waiting to be slaughtered? Upon hearing this, even Tang Mu, an experienced member of the Jianghu, could not help but widen his eyes. This was because these words did sound a little ridiculous. How could this be possible? But as Ryuto continued to explain the plan, Fujiki's eyes widened. They were almost like the eyes of an anime girl. According to Ryuto, after the Rulong Security Company entered the city, some of the elite members of the Rulong Group would secretly form a group called the Second Tokyo Pig Factory to harass the Tokyo dignitaries. Stalking, secretly taking photos, sending threatening letters, bombarding text messages, death threats, splashing paint, scratching cars, and so on. Anyway, as long as it was something that made people feel threatened, they would do it. As long as one had money and power, there were not many who were not afraid of death. Therefore, they would definitely strengthen the security around them, and even the security of their families and companies. And very coincidentally, not long ago, a few large security companies in Tokyo had negative reports. It was so widespread that everyone knew about it, making people uneasy to entrust their safety to them. At this time, the Dragon Security Company appeared quickly like a divine soldier descending from the sky, protecting all the frightened dignitaries. Amidst their happy smiles, the company took away the wealth of the people without shedding a drop of blood. Simply put, it was to ruin the reputation of the competitors, create false panic, take the opportunity to accept business, perfectly complete the mission. At the last step, the pigs were already in the pigsty. This whole set of interlocking strategies was the unruly business war system that the business ghost, Masato Takayama, was particularly good at. It perfectly illustrated his vicious method of not treating his competitors as human beings, let alone his customers as human beings. The next step was to repeatedly kill the pigs and eat their meat. As long as the pigs were in the pigsty, Gao Yuan had millions of methods to scrape off every inch of fat from the pigs. Of course, after doing this a few times, the dignitaries in Tokyo would definitely be suspicious. Therefore, after a period of time, He could also secretly buy several other declining security companies and quietly replace all of them with people from the Rulong group. In this way, when the rich felt that something was wrong and wanted to go another way, they would find that no matter where they went, they were still in the hands of the Rulong group. At most, they would go from one pigsty to another pigsty. This whole plan was named Tokyo Pigsty Plan by us. The purpose is not to provide protection for the dignitaries, but to extract the money they plundered from the common people. When talking about it, Ryuto couldn't help but slam the table, quite a bit of the spirit of the world. Of course, although Ryuto was speaking eloquently in front of Fujiki, in fact, the plan just now was just a temporary idea. It was true that Gao Yuan had made a complete plan not long ago, but he did not put forward the pigsty theory, nor did he have such a strange plan name as Tokyo Pigsty Plan. At the end of the day, this was just a set of excuses that Long Do deliberately made up with his clever brain in order to justify his actions and turn them into chivalrous heroes. We are not dogs, we are just raising pigs, ready to kill pigs for meat at any time. This is not shameful at all. Is this robbing the rich to help the poor? It is indeed the style of a hero. After listening to Ryuto's explanation, Fujiki couldn't help but take a deep breath as if there was a warm current surging in his chest. Seeing that Fujiki's vigilance had been lowered a lot, Ryugu quietly walked over and said with a smile, "By the way, do you know how much oil we expect to extract from the pigsty every year?" "How much?" "It should not be too much in the first year." "Oh, that's about..." "The current goal is to reach 200 billion in annual output, and it is expected to double in the second year. 2000. Poof. Suddenly, Fujiki couldn't help but jump up. It looked a bit funny. As everyone knew, although the Rulong group seemed to be prosperous on the surface, the organization was actually very poor. After all, they adhered to the principle of being a group leader, and no matter what, they would not be involved in the most profitable anesthetic business, gambling business, human or organ trafficking, financial fraud, and so on. Therefore, when he heard that he could make such a large amount of money in a relatively chivalrous way, Fujiki's expression was quite interesting. In the end, Ryuto struck while the iron was hot and asked, "Uncle Fujiki, can you imagine the scene of this room being filled with stacks of money? Furthermore, this is a righteous fortune earned through a righteous act." This. Originally, Fujiki wanted to insist, but there was no other way. The amount of money that Long Do described was simply too much. Therefore, in the evening, the proposal to establish the Rulong Security Company was successfully passed. Chapter 83. That's it. Our Rulong Security Company started to operate today. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. With Gao Yuan around, the business side of things isn't a problem at all. All kinds of procedures are like child's play. Moreover, he doesn't even need to show up. He just needs to rely on his phone. How advanced. Yeah. Sensible also found some foreign security instructors through online channels to train the brothers transferred from Rulong Group into professional security personnel. At the same time, they are also closely monitoring the situation at the police station to ensure that there will be no problems. Yeah. Uncle Fujiki has also said that he will fully support me. The brothers in the Rulong Group are also very happy to receive a generous salary. They are all fighting to sign up for the company. In short, everything is going smoothly. Yeah. However, while all the students were enjoying lunch at Dori No. 1 High School, Kanzaki-colored Glaze was sitting upright on the carpet as he elegantly picked up his chopsticks. Her eating movements were neither fast nor slow, and her demeanor was elegant. However, her eyes never looked at the man sitting opposite her, who was talking animatedly. This strange situation had been like this ever since Ryuto saw her today. It didn't matter if Ryuto came to talk to her, or if they sat in the garden and ate together. In short, this young miss almost completely treated Ryuto as an invisible person. No matter what the other party said, she would just casually respond with two N's. What's going on? Colored Glaze seems to have a problem with me? Was she still angry? Seeing Lu Li's angry look, Long Do thought that she was angry because of what had happened the night before. At that time, because of some misunderstanding, Ryuto had sent her some ungentlemanly text messages. This was indeed a problem. But that was already the day before yesterday. Why was he still angry until now? Just as Ryuto was puzzled, the dancing costume standing next to him secretly revealed a happy smile. Stinky hooligan, big idiot, this is great. You've completely angered the young Mississippi. Looks like the young miss won't bother with you anymore, hee hee. Although Ryuto thought that Colored Glaze was angry about what happened the night before, Dancing Costume knew that she was angry about what happened yesterday morning. That's right, it was the shocking Tsukumori Yunyen x Ryuto Kiryo, the greatest crime in history, that happened yesterday morning. When the eldest miss saw that everyone in the First High BBS forum was discussing the relationship between Yunyen and Ryuto, her expression was very interesting. From the perspective of Dancing Costume, it was as if something that belonged to her had been snatched away by a woman who had suddenly appeared out of nowhere. To put it simply, he was jealous, and he was extremely jealous. Even if Dancing Costume didn't want to admit it, he could see that the eldest miss cared about Ryuto more or less. Therefore, after a day had passed, the eldest miss's resentment and jealousy clearly didn't disappear at all. It might even continue to ferment. Humph, Ryuto Kiryo, this is the price you have to pay for having 1 foot in 2 boats. Accept your punishment, bastard. Looking at the eldest miss's calm expression, but in fact, her face was surging with emotions, Dancing Costume secretly laughed. Perhaps it was because Ryuto had just gained a wave of wisdom yesterday, his brain finally filled up a little bit. He gradually smelled the sour smell of jealousy. Could it be that the eldest miss is jealous? Is it because I went to school with senior sister Yunyen yesterday morning? So she doesn't want to bother with me now? After understanding this, Ryuto sighed and said to Colored Glaze, who was drinking tea, "Colored Glaze, I like you." Suddenly, the tea in Colored Glaze's mouth spurted out from her nose. Cough cough. She quickly took the handkerchief from Dancing Costume's hand, wiped the tea in her nose, and said angrily, Are you crazy?" Originally, Colored Glaze planned to use a cold face to face Ryuto to make him back off. But this bastard actually said, "I like you," without batting an eyelid? And he said it in front of Dancing Costume? Straight ball. This wasn't a simple straight ball, it was simply a super invincible straight line explosive tornado ball, the kind that almost made Colored Glaze's face crooked. But Ryuto was not aware of this, because this was a very normal thing to him. So he smiled indifferently and said, "I'm a man, if I like you then say I like you, if I don't like you then say I don't like you. My words are worthy of the heavens, worthy of the earth, and worthy of myself, what's wrong with that?" Because his attitude was too matter-of-fact, Colored Glaze didn't know how to respond. After a while, Luli sighed and said, "I know your intentions, but since you like me, then you shouldn't have done it with senior sister Yunyen yesterday." "Yes, because I also like her, so it's normal to go to school with her." "Nani? What?" Just when Ryuto said, "I also like Yunyen in Tsukigami," in a serious manner, Colored Glaze and Dancing Costume were stunned and made strange questioning sounds. "Did I hear it wrong? Just now this kid said in front of Miss that he also likes Yunyen in Tsukigami? Moreover, it was added immediately after he had said that he liked the young miss?" Dancing Costume couldn't help but open her mouth wide, with a look that said, "Are you *King drunk?" After all, how could there be such a man in this world? Although there were many men who had 1 foot in 2 boats, a man who dared to say that he liked another woman in front of the person he liked was simply a monster in history. But compared to Dancing Costume, who was so shocked that her eyeballs almost popped out, Colored Glaze was obviously much calmer. She was stunned for a moment, then asked in a tone that said she didn't know whether to laugh or cry, "What is this? Are you announcing to me that you haven't made up your mind, that you haven't made a choice between me and Yunyen?" "No, no, no, I've already made my choice." "Then what is your choice?" "I want both, you and Yunyen are members of my harem." As if he didn't care how shocking his words were, Ryuto said in public without blushing or panting. Indeed, polygamy did exist in this world, and many neon officials and nobles did have several wives in secret. But a weirdo like Ryuto, who dared to directly tell the person he liked that he wanted to marry other wives, was hard to find in the world. Don't you think this is unfair to me? After a few seconds of silence, Colored Glaze asked. Indeed, but my feelings for you are loyal. I think that when you have feelings for multiple women, you no longer have the right to talk about loyalty. But at least I openly expressed my desire to start a harem, and let you have a full understanding of it before that. Compared to those indecisive and deceitful men, I'm much better, right? From this point of view, my feelings are loyal and without a trace of deceit. Even if he was talking about such a shameless thing, Ryuto's tone was still sonorous and powerful. Chapter 84. From the very beginning, Ryuto never hid his love for these female leads. No matter if it was Kanzaki Colored Glaze, Tsukujiri Yunyen, or Saitu Dunya, who was about to transfer over, they were all very important to him. The three of you are my wings. I want to start a harem, and I want the three of you to accept it openly. This is the confession of me, the six-winged angel Ryuto Kiryu. Of course, such an idea that clearly went against the times might not necessarily be accepted by others. No matter if it was Colored Glaze, Yunyen, or Dunya, they were all perfect girls in terms of appearance, personality, and family background. It would be the fortune of 300 lifetimes for a normal person to marry even one of them, let alone all three of them. Would the three of them be able to accept Ryuto's greedy desires? The answer was still unknown. But even so, Ryuto would continue to work hard and use his own hands to open a path to a harem. Even if none of the three of them were willing to date him because of this, Ryuto would accept it. He could only blame himself for not being able to do it. No matter how one looked at it, Ryuto's elementary school-like concept of, I want all of them, was definitely problematic. But Colored Glaze felt that such a concept of love was very similar to this extreme Tao young master. If he liked something, he would work hard to fight for it. He would never lie to himself or others, even if it seemed a little shameless. After all, Ryuto was not a person who cared about his reputation. But she still turned her head and said in an emotionless tone, We're done eating. Hurry up and leave. I still have things to do. Okay. I won't disturb you. Although he did not know if Colored Glaze could accept his words, Ryuto felt that it would be better to give her some time to think about it. However, just after Ryuto left, Colored Glaze picked up her mobile phone and dialed an unfamiliar number. Beep beep. Oh, it's Miss Colored Glaze. You rarely call me. What's the matter? Uncle Suzuki, I have a good friend who owns a company. However, his background is not very clean, so he may be involved in some inspection problems. I hope you can take care of him. So that's how it is. No problem. In the Tokyo Circle, my old bones still have some use. Then I'll leave it to you. I'll ask my assistant to send over the company's information in a while. After exchanging a few more pleasantries with the person on the phone, Colored Glaze hung up. But the moment she hung up the phone, she saw Dancing Costume's stunned expression. Others might not know who Lioli was calling, but it was impossible for Dancing Dress to not know. After all, the Uncle Suzuki she mentioned was the current governor of Tokyo. He was an extremely high-ranking official in the Tokyo administrative area and was responsible for all matters in Tokyo. In other words, he was the real leader of the Tokyo area. The power he held was unimaginable to the average citizen. However, just now, Colored Glaze asked this uncle she knew since childhood to take care of. Ryuto's company? And it was when the latter had just issued a harem declaration? First of all, without a doubt, with the governor of Tokyo looking after it, even if it was just a few words, it would save Ryuto and the others a lot of trouble. But why did Colored Glaze do this? Wasn't she angry just now? Miss? He already treated you like this. Why do you still? He's angry with me, but I still have to do what I have to do. It's better to separate personal feelings from the overall situation. However, although Colored Glaze said, he's angry with me on the surface, her emotions were obviously a lot calmer. After all, honesty was the most important thing in getting along with people. She could see that Ryuto's words were sincere. Even if it was unpleasant to hear, it was what he thought. Compared to secretly having a mistress after getting together with Colored Glaze in the future, or having an unclear relationship with other people outside. Ryuto obviously thought that it would be better for both parties to be honest with Colored Glaze before they started. Really? I don't know if I should call him smart or an idiot. But if he really wants to take me and Yunyen together, then I'm afraid only a man who has dominated this country can do it. On one side is the next vegetarian king of Komiyoshi, a girl who is forbidden to marry. On the other side is the precious daughter of the Tsukujiri Consortium, the carefree daughter who has been strictly watched since childhood. To take these two women into the palace at the same time, the difficulty was no less than taking the head of the emperor and using it as a toilet. Therefore, at this moment, Luli was looking forward to it even more. She wanted to see if the future Dragon Battle Royale could reach this stage. Under the influence of these various thoughts, the clear day quickly passed, and night once again shrouded the earth. Today was a fairly normal day in Tokyo. Other than a company called Rulong Security Company, quietly preparing to go online, everything was so normal. In the dark night, the faint moonlight was like a gauze hanging down, shrouding the backyard of the Rulong Group headquarters in the middle of the night. There was only a small table lamp in Ryuto's room. Looking in from the outside, it was difficult to see what the person inside was doing. Under the dim light, the young master was wearing a dark long-sleeved trench coat, black gloves, black boots, and a hat on his head that covered his yellow hair. Almost his whole body was wrapped in darkness. In addition, this guy also wore a white jade mask that covered almost half of his face. It looked like a role-playing prop. This made his face faintly discernible, and it was difficult to see his specific features clearly. This white jade mask looked very special. Not only did it cover half of the face, but there was also a small protrusion on the mouth, like a small microphone. In fact, it was really something similar to a small microphone, because it could make a noticeable difference in the sound. Ahem, good evening, have you eaten? After putting on the mask, Ryuto casually said such a sentence to the air. A slightly hoarse and mature voice echoed in the air. It was completely different from Ryuto's usual voice. Not bad. The 500,000 yuan was worth it. After confirming that this rogue voice-changing mask was effective, Ryuto nodded slightly. The mask on his face was a new product that he bought from the Karma Mall not long ago. After wearing this mask worth 500,000 yuan, not only could it cover the face, but it could also change the voice, making it impossible for people to recognize who the person was. It could be said that it was a must-have for rogues. Of course, Ryuto didn't dress up like this for rogues, but to uphold justice. Chapter 85. After tasting the sweetness of blackberry finance not long ago, the Dragonhead realized that the gangsters who did the dirty work were quite rich. For example, blackberry finance was 6 million. If there were 10 of them, wouldn't it be 60 million? Wouldn't 100 of them be as much as 600 million? Therefore, before the Rulong Security Company was on the right track, Ryuto planned to use this to make some money. Therefore, with the sense of justice of punishing evil, he prepared to enter the streets at night to see if he could get rid of the evil. It's about time. Let's go. After confirming that he didn't miss anything, Ryuto turned off the table lamp and jumped out of the window. Jumping over walls was a common occurrence for him. When the cold wind of the night blew on Ryuto's face, it even brought a feeling of satisfaction. Under the cover of the moonlight, the young man rushed out of the Rulong Group headquarters with extreme speed and sneaked into the streets of Tokyo. Under the night sky, Tokyo was a city that never slept. Neon lights flashed here, and most of the streets were still lit up. But under the lights, there was still an unconcealable evil churning, waiting for the people of the night to save it. Phew! 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 Help! Help! When the hour hand of the clock pointed to 2 in the morning, at a remote corner outside a bar, a woman who looked gaudy was panting as she squatted against the wall. Her mouth kept calling for help. Just as the woman, who looked to be in her early 20s, leaned against the corner and shivered. 3 gangsters who looked sloppy and almost had "I'm not a good person" on their forehead walked over with a smile. Hee, what's there to run for? We just want to have some fun with you. We won't do anything to you. Their lips curled up into a wretched arc, and their tone was extremely insulting. It was easy to imagine what would happen later. It was already late at night, and there weren't many people passing by this alley. If this continued, wouldn't the girl fall into the devil's claws? However, just as the leader of the group was about to grab the woman and forcefully pull her into the depths of the alley to have some fun. "Hey guys, do you have any money?" A hoarse voice suddenly drifted over from the wall above them. "Who is it?" The leader hurriedly looked up at the top of the wall. Under the dim light of the street lamps, a dark figure appeared there. On top of the wall that was more than 2 meters high, a man who was almost completely wrapped in black sat there as if he was watching a joke, looking down at the 4 people below. "You! What the hell was that? Are you acting by dressing up like this? He must have gone to the wrong set. Or are you crazy?" After seeing the uninvited guest's appearance, the leader instinctively cursed. But just at the moment when he just cursed, the man above, Ryuto, had already jumped down from the wall that was more than 2 meters high and directly stepped on the head of the gangster closest to him. It was needless to say how strong the impact of a person jumping down from a 2-meter-high wall was. The gangster only saw the shadow on his head quickly become bigger, then there was a sharp pain on his forehead, and he immediately lost consciousness. Bastard. Just after Ryuto took the lead and killed one person, another gangster standing next to the leader immediately made his move. He picked up a glass bottle from the garbage next to him and smashed it at Ryuto's head without hesitation. Just as he was halfway through swinging the bottle in his hand, an iron-like hand grabbed his wrist and forcefully twisted it downwards. "Gotcha!" Ah! With the crisp sound of bones, the gangster's wrist was broken on the spot, and he fell to the ground crying while holding his wrist. After seeing Ryuto kill his 2 underlings in the blink of an eye, the leader couldn't help but take a half step back, and there was obvious fear in his eyes. For a group of street thugs like them, being able to clearly identify the strength of the other party was actually a very important skill. Otherwise, if they were to bump into an iron plate one day and die, that would be a bit too stupid. Judging from the current situation, they should have hit a metal plate. Moreover, this metal plate was solid. It was F*King hard. So he couldn't help but ask, "Who are you? What is your purpose?" "I am the messenger of justice, the black hero who maintains the order of this city." "Black hero? Maintain the order?" "Yes, now leave all the valuable things on you and your companions, and then take them away." "Wait, you have the nerve to call yourself the messenger of justice, bastard? Black hero? Robber?" At this time, the leader silently ridiculed in his heart, but he quickly took out a very sharp sawtooth military knife from his waist. This sawtooth military knife was a high-end product he bought from the black market at a high price. It was very sharp and full of murderous aura, the kind that ordinary people would immediately pee their pants when they see it. "You!" However, just as the leader was about to struggle with the weapon, his eyes suddenly widened. Because the moment the leader raised his head, a black pistol was already pointed at his lower body. "You took out this knife, what are you going to do?" Ryuto asked with a smile when he pointed the gun at the opponent's vital part. There are hundreds of martial arts, but this is the spear technique. When the opponent is unprepared, attack the penis. You use a weapon, I also use a weapon, you use a knife, I use a gun, this is very fair. "You! Look at this military knife. Isn't it good? I was just going to take it out to show my filial piety to you, and the money on them is all for you." When the gun was pointed at him, the leader's expression became very flattering, and he quickly and skillfully searched for all the valuable things from the 2 underlings on the ground. "Wallet. Take it away. Throw away the useless ID. Watch. Take it away, but don't want the electronic watch, it's not worth much. Phone. Take it away, remove the SIM card and throw it in the smelly ditch. Gold and silver ornaments? Take it away, take it all away." In the end, even the sawtooth military knife in his hand was put into a bag, and after respectfully handing it over, the leader said with a bitter smile, "That, Mr. Black Hero, can I go now?" Ryuto weighed the weight of the goods in his hand and said with satisfaction, "Well, it was a pleasure working with you, get out." Just like this, the messenger of justice and the street thug reached a consensus. The latter carried his companion with a complicated expression and ran away. The messenger of justice took a bag full of valuables and walked toward the woman who was almost hurt. When the woman realized that the hero saved her, she also showed a happy smile and said to him with a smile, "I'm very grateful. Cut the crap, how much money do you have? Throw it all into the bag." "What?" After hearing the words that obviously didn't sound like a hero, the expression on the woman's face froze. Chapter 86. Something's wrong with this? Aren't you the hero of justice, Black Hero? Why do you want money from me, the victim? When he saw her expression, Ryuto asked impatiently, "Do you think I look like your father?" "No, you don't. Since I'm not your father, why should I save you for free? It seems since I saved you, you should give me some compensation. This is very reasonable, right?" This seems to sound quite reasonable. But since she got rid of the fate of being insulted, the woman had nothing to say. She could only obediently throw all the valuable things into the bag. Including cash, jewelry, and even mobile phones, she basically didn't leave anything valuable behind. After taking out a few hundred yen for the woman to take the tram back, Ryuto quickly disappeared into the darkness, leaving only a righteous figure carrying a bag of money. "Not bad, it's quite heavy." After weighing the heavy bag in his hand, the dark hero showed a happy smile. This was a business. It was definitely not the only one Ryuto did tonight. It was even the simplest one among the hundreds of orders he would do next. After feeling the sweetness of this kind of thing, the messenger of justice, Black Hero, began a crazy day and night money-making journey in the next 5 days. Because the Rulong Security Company was still in preparation, Ryuto had nothing to do during the day. He usually went to school as usual, and then slept in the classroom. At noon, he went to find colored glaze to eat, and in the afternoon, he went to find Yun Yen to talk about books. He was a scumbag trying to capture 2 female protagonists in a love game. But in the evening, the night in Tokyo, Ryuto's wonderful nightlife began. Under the dark night, the messenger of justice, Black Hero, quickly passed through the streets and alleys of Tokyo, and carried out a crazy search for those who obviously didn't look like good guys. As long as it was a gangster who didn't look like a good guy, whether they were doing bad things or not, Ryuto would make a move on the spot. After beating someone up, they would take all their belongings. They would not let go of any valuable items. During the day, Ryuto would roll up all the valuables in gunny sacks and hand them over to Gao Yuan. He would have someone transport them to the black market overseas and sell them. Gao Yuan was also curious as to where Boss had gotten so many watches, accessories, phones, and other miscellaneous gadgets. But he still faithfully found someone to sell all these goods by mail, and all of them were exchanged for clean cash through various channels. It had to be said that Gao Yuan's ability in financial management was indeed quite excellent. Even if a large number of goods were shipped to the black market abroad to be sold, no one could find out the origin of the goods, let alone find out who the seller was. Just like that, Ryuto's wallet became richer day by day, and the speed was extremely fast. Phew, it's another day full of riches. When the morning of the 6th day arrived, Ryuto dragged his tired body and a big sack of messy things back to his room. He then sat down on the ground. Upholding justice, fighting crime, this kind of work was really tiring, but making money was also really making money. 4-5 consecutive nights, almost every time the clock rang at 1 o'clock in the morning, Ryuto would wear the Black Hero costume and appear in the streets of Tokyo to fight for justice and money. According to incomplete statistics, the number of gangsters that Ryuto carried out justice during this period of time was in the hundreds. The intercepted goods were also in the hundreds. Logically speaking, this level of large-scale robbery should have caused a large degree of public opinion, but in fact, it did not. First of all, the gangsters that the boss chose were not good people, and the amount of money obtained from them wasn't much. After all, no one would bring hundreds of thousands or millions of items when shopping. At most, they would have some cash in their wallet, some rings, necklaces, cell phones, and other valuables. For those gangsters who often walk by the river, this kind of situation of being robbed and extorted could be said to be a common occurrence. As long as there was no serious injury or death, even they themselves wouldn't take this matter to heart, let alone calling the police. This kind of thing was too common in Tokyo at night, and the police were too lazy to care about them. However, after experiencing Ryuto's crazy justice enforcement, the number of gangsters strolling in the alleys in the middle of the night had significantly reduced. Perhaps many people also knew that there was such a psychopath who was specifically targeting the unlucky people who were alone. But this had nothing to do with Ryuto. Anyway, the money in his hands was a real benefit. He now had to think about how to spend the money. After putting a new sack of dropped goods in the corner of the room and preparing to send it to Gao Yuan to sell, Ryuto lay on the bed and opened the system interface, ready to spend a long time. After all, after 5 days of farming time, now Ryuto's personal attribute panel had become like this. Name, Ryuto Kiryoage, 16 years old. Attributes: Wisdom LV2, Physique LV3, Courage LV2, Insight LV1, Charm LV2. Title: Beginner Assassin, obtained after 100 successful sneak attacks, presence reduced by 20% when equipped. Equipment: M9 pistol, good. Taser stun gun, good. Dragon tooth serrated knife, good. Tools: Gangster Velcro, Gangster Analysis Mirror Skills, Furamaki Style Martial Arts, Iron Bone Mastery, Copper Skin Mastery. Total assets: 31,217,800 yuan. How to describe it? It was a kind of earth-shaking change, right? First of all, because of the large number of sneak attacks, Ryuto received a new glorious title, Beginner Assassin. This title could reduce presence, which was to make it difficult for others to notice you. It was a quite useful special ability when carrying out some secret operations. Secondly, the equipment on his body was also changed into something quite good under the condition of Uncle Fujiki. For example, the small, light, high accuracy, and 15 rounds of ammunition capacity M9 pistol, and the taser stun gun that could shoot an electric dart to electrocute people. These were all equipment that was difficult for ordinary people to get. As for the last, dragon tooth serrated knife, it was a loot that Ryuto looted when he went out to do justice for the first time. Because of the good quality, he didn't sell it, but kept it for his own use. Of course, other than the rewards from the title and equipment, the biggest reward was naturally the small treasury that was now filled to the brim. It was filled with real money. Chapter 87. Now Ryuto's total assets were as much as 31,217,800. God, when have I, Ryuto Kiryo, ever seen such a large sum of money in my life? If I use this money to buy candy, how long would it take to finish it? Of course, this money wasn't for nothing. Most of the money was stained with blood and sweat. Excluding the few million that the Dragon Head had, in these 5 days, his net income was about 20 million. Just like what was said, this money was stained with blood and sweat. To be precise, it was stained with other people's blood and Ryuto's sweat. Have you seen Tokyo at 4 in the morning? Have you walked through the streets of Tokyo in the morning? Have you ever tried to sneak up behind someone and give them a surprise attack, then quickly raid their wallet? You haven't, so you don't know how hard Ryuto worked these days. Sigh, let's not talk about it. Just thinking about it makes me want to cry. Let's spend the money first. Looking at the huge sum of money flashing on his status page, Ryuto's face revealed a mysterious smile. 30 million in total assets wasn't a lot, but it wasn't a small amount either. It depended on how Ryuto used it. First, I should upgrade all the attributes that haven't been upgraded yet. Immediately, Ryuto looked at his status bar and looked at the 2 attributes that haven't been upgraded yet. So far, among the 5 attributes of wisdom, physique, courage, insight, and charm, only courage and insight haven't been upgraded yet. The first attribute upgrade only required 5 million yen. It was quite worth it. Moreover, the courage attribute was naturally at level 2. At the beginning, Ryuto didn't think that courage was useful. It wasn't until that time when he confronted Eternal Empress Amaterasu, and was almost scared to the point of being unable to move, that he finally realized the benefits of having such a bold personality. As for insight, the benefits were even more obvious. It could directly see other people's emotions and actions. It provided obvious help whether it was in daily life or in battle. Therefore, after Ryuto boldly clicked a few times, the two attributes were upgraded at the same time and emitted a golden light. After the upgrade, Ryuto's attributes became Wisdom LV2, Physique LV3, Courage LV3, Insight LV2, Charm LV2. Without changing any of his attributes through the title, his 5 attributes were already considered to be quite decent and were gradually developing in the direction of a bucket. Although upgrading these 2 attributes cost 10 million yen, compared to the cost of the second upgrade, it was cheap as if it didn't cost money. After all, starting from the second upgrade, the cost of a single upgrade would soar from 5 million to 50 million. This huge amount of money was not something he could afford at the moment. Thus, Ryudo took the remaining 20 million yen and opened the Krypton shop that he hadn't visited in a long time. Although there was a dazzling array of items tempting him, compared to items, Ryuto still felt that skill books were more practical. Especially after he had tasted the benefits of Iron Bone Mastery and Bronze Skin Mastery, he could not wait to buy more and more powerful skills. After browsing through the skill store, Ryuto first saw 2 particularly practical skills. These 2 skills were Brawler Doesn't Die by Bare Hands and Parkour Master. The former allowed him to turn anything in his hand into a combat tool when he didn't have a weapon. Even a chair could be used as an attack weapon. It could be said to be the essence of the dragon style. The latter could increase his running speed and agility. Even in a very complicated environment, he could still run at full speed. It could be said to be a godly escape tool. These 2 skills combined with the previous passive of Copper Skin and Iron Bone should be enough to deal with most combat environments. Even if he encountered a situation like before where professional mercenaries came to cause trouble, Ryuto would still have the strength to fight. Of course, such practical skills had a very practical price. After all, the price of these 2 skills was 3 million yen respectively. He suddenly lost another 6 million. However, looking at the 2 new skills with 20% proficiency in the skill bar, Ryuto still felt quite happy. After buying the skills, he casually picked up an ear pick from the side. With a slight movement of his wrist, this weapon, which was not a weapon, was thrown at the wall with the speed and strength of a flying knife. Whoosh! Squeak! Accompanied by a strong wind-breaking sound and a slight creaking sound, the ear-digging spoon with a blunt head and light weight actually pierced through the wall 5 meters away, abruptly getting stuck on top of it. Although the depth of the penetration was not very exaggerated, with the sharpness and weight of the ear pick, the power caused by this throw could be said to be quite terrifying. Good God, is this Hooligans Don't Die by Their Hands? It really felt like a random pebble could beat someone until they cried out in pain. Looking at the pair of hands that didn't seem special on the surface, but had just made a shocking move. For the first time, Long Do deeply felt how terrifying his potential was. Now, Hooligans Don't Die by Their Hands only had 20% proficiency. If he continued to research or continue to buy skill books to reach 100%, wouldn't he be able to hurt people with flying flowers and falling leaves? At that time, why would he need pistols, rifles, and sniper rifles? He could take a stone and throw it 1,000 meters away. Maybe it could make a big hole in a person's head. The legendary Internal Force Master was just like that. However, the premise was that there must be so many skill books to buy. After all, money was common, but skill books were not common. This thing was still a scarce resource. However, after buying these 2 skills, Dragon Head still had about 15 million left in his hands, so it was not a problem to buy a few more skill books. But there were too many skills in this skill store, and all kinds of skills were a bit too messy, which really made him a little dizzy. What the hell is this? Let's just see what's on the last page. After continuing to search in the skill store with excitement and speechlessness for a while, Ryuto couldn't help but pull and directly swipe to the bottom page of the skill store. But at this moment, what appeared in front of his eyes was the most unique, blank skill book, with no name written on it. What is this? Ryuto curiously opened the blank skill book, and then he was suddenly energized. Because the description of this blank skill book was, after buying this skill book, you can specify to increase the proficiency of any skill in the skill bar by 20%. It's actually a skill book that can level up any skill. This is a little too expensive, you bastard. Just when Ryuto wanted to cheer, he saw the price of 10 million yen of this skill book, and suddenly felt that he couldn't cheer. Chapter 88. Although skill books could be purchased repeatedly to increase proficiency, it was not something that would appear whenever one wished. According to Ryuto's previous experience in the item store, the skill books in the skill store were also one death, one exchange, and there was no telling what kind of items would appear. Therefore, if one wanted to level up a specific skill, it required a lot of luck. If one was unlucky, even if they died 3 to 5 times, they might not be able to get the skill book they wanted. However, this blank skill book was different. It could actually increase the proficiency of any skill. It was simply an omnipotent skill leveling tool. Of course, based on such a convenient foundation, it was much more expensive than normal skill books. One skill book actually cost 10 million. What a robbery. What kind of concept was 10 million? One should know that the 4 practical skills, Iron Bone Mastery, Bronze Skin Mastery, Rogues Don't Die by Bare Hands, and Parkour Pro, only cost 8 million. In a situation where one was not rich, such an expensive item was not worth buying. After all, there was a high chance that it would fail, and the skill book would also have a high chance of being refreshed. However, Ryuto hesitated for a moment, and looked at the Furamaki-style martial arts in his skill pane, which only had a 1% proficiency. Unlike the other purchased skills, the Ancient Shepherd-style martial arts was a skill that had been imparted to Zhang Xian orally by Master Sotaro. Thus, the starting proficiency of the skill was ridiculously low, making it impossible to use it normally. At the same time, because it was not in the skill store, Ryuto could not buy the skill book to increase its proficiency. He could only look at it and pretend that it did not exist. However, with the blank skill book, the situation changed. As long as Ryuto was willing, he could spend 10 million to immediately raise the Furamaki-style martial arts to 21% proficiency, and this level of proficiency could be used in actual combat. If that's the case, I can go to Furamaki's appointment tonight openly, right? Thinking of this, Ryuto's mind flashed with the image of a playful old man. Today happened to be the 7th day of his appointment with Furamaki Sotaro, which was also the day he was going to attend the appointment tonight. To be honest, Ryuto didn't want to go because he didn't think it was meaningful to go. After all, during this period of time, Ryuto had not practiced the profound meaning of skill, Tiger Fall at all. Naturally, it was impossible for him to use it in actual combat. Since he couldn't use it anyway, what was the point of going there to embarrass himself? It would be better for him to be tactful and not show up. However, since he had the blank skill book, Ryuto could go and meet the old man for a while. This was because his Furamaki-style martial arts had indeed reached a level where it could be used in actual combat. What should I do? This is 10 million. Ryuto couldn't help but scratch his head. He seemed to be in a dilemma as to whether or not he should directly invest such a large sum of money in Furamaki-style martial arts. Beep beep, beep beep beep. However, at this moment, Ryuto's phone suddenly vibrated slightly. This was a sign that someone had sent a message. Ryuto picked up his phone and looked at it. Only then did he realize that the person who was looking for him was Yun Yen from Tsukujiri. He looked at the time again. It was only 7 in the morning. Why did Yun Yen wake up so early and send him a message? When he opened the message, Ryuto's expression immediately became a little dumbfounded. Speaking of which, you're going to report your results to the old man of ancient martial arts tonight, right? I'm so excited. If this plot was written in a novel, it would definitely be very interesting. Thinking of this, I couldn't sleep the whole night, p greater than over equal to with q. Before Ryuto could respond, a second message came. That, actually, if you don't mind, can you bring me to the report tonight? I want to see the scene of a martial arts test between master and disciple with my own eyes. Please, please, please. *omega \**. After reading these 2 consecutive messages, Ryuto seemed to see Yun Yen nervously holding the phone on the other side, waiting for his reply through the phone. From a certain point of view, Yun Yen from Tsukujiri was really a very innocent person. After all, she was very well protected by her family since she was young. The dangers of the world seemed to have nothing to do with her. But even so, Yun Yen was too excited. She was like a primary school student who was ready to go hiking. If he had known, he wouldn't have told her the story of the old man Furamaki. Suddenly, Ryuto sighed slightly. He looked at the message and couldn't help but shake his head. So far, Ryuto had already made a contract with 2 ladies. The first contract was a 2-year contract with colored glaze, and the second contract was a research contract with Yun Yen. According to the content of the previous contract, Ryuto needed to provide Yun Yen with his daily life and some information about the underground world to help her write a more realistic and tense novel plot. Therefore, during this period, Ryuto often chatted with Yun Yen in various places and told her about some of the things that happened around him. Unfortunately, it included the story of him following his father's order to find the Furamaki Ryu master. Ryuto obviously didn't take this matter too seriously, but Yun Yen took it seriously. She was even more nervous than him. I didn't expect Yun Yen to be so concerned about this kind of thing. Forget it, I'll take her there tonight. As if he didn't want to disappoint her, Ryuto typed, "No problem, let's talk at school" on his phone and sent the message back. 2 seconds after sending the message, a very cheerful, "Good yesha," was heard. Was quickly sent back. Through the small emoji, Yun Yen's cheers seemed to be close to his ears. Okay. There's no turning back now. After putting down the phone, Ryuto looked up at the familiar ceiling of the room and clicked on the blank skill book option. There was no other way. Since Yun Yen wanted to see him compete with the old man Furamaki, then Ryuto had to increase the proficiency of the Furamaki Ryu-style martial arts, no matter what. Otherwise, if he was defeated by the old man in an unsightly posture when the 2 of them fought, and this kind of thing was personally witnessed and recorded in the book by Yun Yen, then it would really be a great humiliation to the level of a society's death. As the 10 million disappeared, Ryuto's Furamaki Ryu-style martial arts also jumped to 21% proficiency. But this wasn't enough. After leveling up the skill, Ryuto went directly to the door and shouted at the courtyard next to him, "Come in." "Here. Second generation master. What are your orders?" Before the voice died away, 3 extreme Dao in black suits rushed in from outside the courtyard not far away. Chapter 89. Near Ryuto, there were always more than 3 elite members of the Rulon group, protecting him. Although Ryuto had always been suspicious of this group of elites, who could not even be discovered when he sneaked out, it was undeniable that this group of extreme Dao members were indeed good at fighting. After seeing the 3 people appear, Ryuto also pointed at the nearest one and ordered, "You come over and punch me hard." Punch the second King Yenluo hard? Yes. Even if he received such a strange order, the black-clothed extreme Dao still chose to obey unconditionally. Judging from this obedience, it was not unreasonable for Fujiki to say that they were the elite members of the Rulon group. They already felt a bit like soldiers. Therefore, the tall and strong black-clothed extreme Dao quickly moved his body and walked in front of Ryuto. He raised his fists and clenched his iron-like fists, and a fierce light flashed in his eyes. In the next second, the black-clothed man's right foot turned slightly, and he suddenly exerted force on the ground. Using his foot as his waist, his belt as his shoulder, and his shoulder as his shoulder, he threw a very standard right straight punch at Ryuto's face. Obviously, he should have seriously practiced boxing for a long time. After all, the movement of this punch was quite standard. The strength of his whole body was smooth when he swung his arm, and there was even a faint crisp sound. "Ah. So that's how it is, I understand now." But the moment the black-clothed man threw a punch, Ryuto's body almost instinctively made a corresponding movement in sync with him. The young man's feet stepped forward, and his right knee quickly crouched. While his body sank to the right front, his left arm was like a whip, and he heavily bombarded the midline of the black-clothed man's abdomen with a punching posture. Ugh! The moment the punch landed, the black-clothed man only felt as if the air in his lungs had exploded. His breathing stopped on the spot, and his entire body's continuous punch movement also stopped in a strange posture. I can't move? What am I doing? Before the man in black could recover from the stagnation effect brought by this punch, Long Do had quickly circled to the side of his body and took out a dragon-tooth sawtooth saber from somewhere and placed it on the man's neck. From the moment the man in black threw a punch to the moment the knife was placed on his neck, only a second had passed. For a moment, the fear of being killed enveloped Black Robe's body. He didn't even have the time to feel the pain of his lungs exploding and the suffocating pain. Cold sweat quickly dripped down his forehead. "How are you? Are you all right?" After feeling his fear, Ryuto also quickly withdrew his sword, reached out and patted the shoulder of the man in black, and asked with concern, "Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh." Immediately, the black-clothed man who was punched pressed his hand against his abdomen and took a few deep breaths. Then, he said with admiration, "Second-generation head, you are really amazing. This subordinate is truly impressed." Although the black-clothed man didn't use his full strength when punching, Ryuto was the same in this aspect. If the two sides really fought, the result would definitely be the black-clothed man being paralyzed by a punch, and then being finished off by the saber. Especially in the eyes of the two extreme Taoists on the side, Ryuto's dodging and punching just now was really amazing. Almost at the same time the man punched, his body had already completed the dodging movement, and at the same time, he struck first. The most terrifying thing was that Ryuto's counterattack just now was almost impossible to defend against. This was also one of the three profound skills of the Furamaki sect, the core skill of Profound Skill of Tigerfall. The essence of Profound Skill of Tigerfall was to use a short distance, small movement to exert force. The moment the enemy attacked, the 1-inch punch would hit the opponent's diaphragm first. If the position, angle, and strength were all suitable, the diaphragm that was hit would produce a transient spasm phenomenon, causing the breathing to stagnate and the body to enter a rigid state. For a short period of time, the opponent would be at his mercy. Judging from the situation when Ryuto used Profound Skill of Tigerfall on someone in actual combat for the first time, his mastery of Furamaki sect martial arts was already quite good. Although the proficiency of this skill was only 21%, this proficiency was already considered a novice, and could be used in actual combat. If one wanted to slowly cultivate to this level under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to do it without a few years of time, except for a natural-born freak like Yuma. Just like this, in the next hour, Ryuto let the three black-clothed bodyguards act as his helpers. Or to put it more bluntly, he was actually using Tiger Fall to beat the three of them to the ground in turns. Through using this skill over and over again, Ryuto also quickly grasped the key to this skill. Combined with his current strong physical fitness, it could be used to great effect. Not long ago, after all of his attributes were increased, the benefits of the attribute increase could be said to be immediate. LV3 Courage could help Ryuto remain calm in any situation. Even in an intense battle, he could still remain unbelievably calm. LV2 Insight gave him stronger dynamic vision and observation, allowing him to see the opponent's movements more clearly. Combined with Profound Skill of Tigerfall, it was like adding wings to a tiger. If he added the newly acquired skills, as well as the few high-end equipment hidden on his body that he could take out at any time, it could be said that the current Ryuto was at least 3 to 4 times stronger than a week ago. He had reached the point where he could truly be called the second generation of the Rulon group, Ryuto Kiryo. As time passed by, the 8 o'clock alarm to prepare for school rang as promised. Phew, it's about time to prepare for school. Alright, the three of you go and have a good rest. If you feel uncomfortable, report it as a work injury. Yes. Seeing the second-generation head leisurely walk out, the three black-clothed men, who were lying on the ground, responded in a weak tone. It was obvious that they had been taught a little badly. However, just as Ryuto was about to walk toward the door and get into Narukai Otani's car as usual, Narukai ran toward him with heavy steps. Second generation. Not good. Early in the morning, Otani's tone was very serious, as if he had seen something that made him turn pale with fright. When Ryuto saw his expression, he frowned. "What's going on? Is there an enemy attack?" "It's not an enemy, but there's a very expensive-looking car parked at the entrance of our headquarters, and the owner of the car said that they're waiting for you to go to school together." "A very expensive car? Waiting for me to go to school together? What the hell?" After hearing Otani's words, Ryuto walked out of the door with a stomach full of curiosity. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw senior sister Yun Yen sitting in a very special-looking black car and waving at him with a smile. Chapter 90. When Ryuto saw the car that was usually used to pick up and drop off Yun Yen, he immediately understood what Narukai meant by, "It looks expensive." This was a low-key but luxurious black extended luxury car. The body lines were upright, solemn, and magnificent. Every detail was taken into account to the point of amazement. As long as one had a little bit of knowledge about cars, it was not difficult to see that the price of this car was calculated with at least 7 digits. And these 7 digits were in USD. "Mr. Name, the person in the car is..." "That's my friend. Don't worry about school today. Just pick me up after school in the afternoon." After telling Narukai, Ryuto did not hesitate to walk to the car parked outside. Seeing Ryuto walking over, Yun Yen, who was sitting in the back seat, greeted with a smile, "Ryuto classmate, good morning. Is my appearance here bothering you?" "Not bothering, it's just a bit refreshing." Under Yun Yen's signal, the door of the back seat was opened, and Ryuto also lowered his body slightly and sat in. Just like how it looked from the outside, the back seat of this extended limousine was quite spacious. It could almost accommodate 4 people playing mahjong inside. After sitting in, the middle-aged man in charge of driving frowned and snorted without leaving a trace. "Uncle Shinagawa, you can drive." "Yes, Mississippi," the middle-aged man nodded respectfully, but before starting the car, he turned his head and stared at Ryuto as if to convey the meaning of, "Don't touch Mississippi." Ryuto had never seen this middle-aged man in the game. He should be the person responsible for picking up and dropping off Yun Yen. However, Yun Yen was usually well protected by her family and almost never had contact with boys. It was not difficult to understand why this uncle was so wary of Ryuto. After all, this was the first time in many years that Miss Yun Yen took a boy to school together. And from the happy expression on Miss Yun Yen's face, she seemed to be very close to the boy. After getting in the car, Ryuto sighed and smiled bitterly. "Yun Yen, you are too." Ahem. Before Ryuto finished speaking, Yun Yen coughed and pointed at the phone. Beep beep. Beep beep beep. Suddenly, Ryuto's phone rang with a text message. He opened the text message from Yun Yen. It said, "Let's talk about anything, but tonight we have to talk on the phone to avoid being discovered by Uncle Shinagawa." At the same time, Yun Yen said with a smile, "Ryuto, have you read the book Harry Peter and the Stone Ghost Mask I recommended to you last time?" "Yes, it's quite interesting, especially when Voldemort puts on the Stone Ghost Mask and shouts Peter. I don't want to be a human anymore. This scene is really epic-making." "Well, are you playing a cop movie here?" Ryuto replied while lowering his head to type a reply. "Aren't you a little too excited? Do you need to drive over to pick me up? Are you afraid that I won't take you?" So you like that kind of big scene? In fact, my favorite scene in the first book is the scene where the first-generation Peter and Voldemort perish together, and Jenny drifts away from the sea with a child. Hee hee, I'm not afraid that you won't take me up. I just want to talk to you about some details early, such as how you should pick me up tonight. I don't like tragedies. I don't like to read novels where the main character dies in the end. It's probably because I've died so many times. Should I pick you up tonight? How should I pick you up? Ha ha ha, Ryuto, you really know how to joke. How can a person die so many times? I'll send you the map of my house later. There's a special route for sneaking out. You just have to pick me up at the end." Just like that, Ryuto chatted with Yun Yen on the surface while chatting with her on the phone. This kind of chatting made Ryuto's head buzzing. Fortunately, after Yun Yen sent him the map, she stopped. Good heavens! I'm just bringing her out to watch a test. Why does it have to be so troublesome to sneak out of the house? Will she think that I'm kidnapping Yunyen? Suddenly, Ryuto felt like he had accidentally boarded a pirate ship. He originally thought that he could just tell Yunyen some of his true feelings and let her focus on her novel. But he didn't think that this Missy would become more and more addicted to it. She wanted to participate in it more and more. She didn't even hesitate to leave her house to go out with her male classmates at night. To put it simply, Yunyen seemed to be quickly learning bad things. She was already strictly disciplined by her family. She yearned for the outside world. Especially for people like Ryuto who lived in the underworld, she had an unrealistic romantic fantasy. Therefore, after getting in touch with Ryuto, Yunyen was like a bird that quietly used a wire to pry open a birdcage. She was in the rebellious phase of young people. Considering Yunyan's beautiful appearance and charm that could cause the downfall of a city, this state was actually very dangerous. It was very easy for her to be deceived by men with bad intentions. Cough, cough. But fortunately, the person who took her out at night was me. Which young man in his teens could be as gentlemanly as me? More trustworthy than me? Thinking of this, Ryuto couldn't help but reach out and tidy up his hair. He seemed to have completely forgotten the shocking harem declaration he made in front of colored glaze not long ago. However, just as Ryuto and Yunyen's conversation returned to the normal state, the special car was getting closer and closer to Dori First High School. But just when the car came to the last traffic light in the school area and stopped because of the red light, an antique car that was driving towards the school from the side of the road attracted Yunyan's attention. Huh? Isn't that the car of the Saito family? What? Saito family? When Long Do heard a familiar name, he quickly looked in the direction of the voice. But when he looked in the direction of the antique car, the car had quickly turned the corner and left. Ryuto could only see a silver-like color from the back seat. Wait, that's hair? This color of hair? Could it be? In this world, Ryuto only knew one person who had silver-like hair. That was the young lady of the ancient martial arts family, Saito Dunya. At the same time, she was also the third female protagonist in the game Red Album 2, No Survivors. Chapter 91. In Red Photo Album 2, No Survivors, the three female leads had very different appearances, personalities, family backgrounds, and characteristics, so it was easy to distinguish them. The first female lead, Colored Glaze, belonged to the bureaucratic family, and her family had many connections with various government officials. The second female lead, Yunyen, belonged to the capitalist family, and her family had many connections with various business people. The third female lead, Saito Dunya, belonged to the Jonghu family. Her family was basically the type that mingled in the Jonghu. Of course, this didn't mean that Dunya was an underground member like Ryuto. In fact, the Saito Martial Arts Dojo was an ancient martial arts family that had been passed down for hundreds of years, and could be considered as another form of mingling in the Jonghu. The Saito Guild Hall was well versed in modern martial arts, such as karate, judo, kickboxing, kendo, aikido, and aikido, as well as ancient martial arts, such as the art of war, the art of war, the art of war, the art of water, the art of bone, the art of spear, and the art of jiu-jitsu. After hundreds of years of development, the dojo had covered the entire country, and almost everywhere there were martial arts practitioners, there would be a Saito martial arts dojo. It could be said that it was like a holy land for martial arts practitioners in the country. From this, it could be seen that the Saito family was a very ancient and traditional family, and its history was even longer than the Komiyoshi family. Therefore, when the current head of the family secretly married a bear ballerina in the north and gave birth to a white-haired mixed-blood daughter, it was said that the Saito family experienced an earthquake. For the Saito family, which had always been famous for its long history and traditions, having a white-haired mixed blood in the family was like having a bear suddenly appear in a nest of Shiba Inu, and the shock was unimaginable. If it wasn't for the fact that Dunya's father was the most famous martial arts master of the current generation, and that he was strong enough to suppress the Curry people, she might have been directly thrown to the snowy north to fend for herself. But even if her father was still alive, Dunya, who was born in such a family, was naturally not liked since she was young. This matter was not new, and even Yunyen knew about it. Silver white hair. Is that Sai-tu Dunya? Oh right, she seems to be transferring to Dori First High School, as well. It should be today. When Ryuto told Yunyen what he had just seen, she immediately guessed the identity of the young lady in the car. Yunyen would sometimes attend some banquets, and she had met Dunya once or twice. She had a deep impression of the cute doll-like child. Yunyen, have you seen Dunya? Dunya? You call her so intimately. Do you know her? I've only heard of her name. After being glanced at by Yunyen, Ryuto quickly shook his head. In fact, Ryuto didn't know Dunya. He was already quite familiar with her. After all, he was tortured by Dunya in the game's third quest. If Colored Glaze was a tsundere main character, Yunyen was a natural healer, and Dunya was a naughty little devil. The white-haired loli was definitely a natural talent in teasing people and acting. She could fool people in minutes, and even if they were sold, they would still turn around and help her count the money. As for Dunya's personality problem, the idiotic netizens once used the phrase, lack of love from a young age, need a beating when you grow up, to accurately describe her. And everyone agreed that if it wasn't for Dunya's good looks, with her personality, she would have been beaten to death hundreds of times. But it couldn't be helped. In this kind of game, looks were everything. Morals and values followed one's facial features, and it wasn't as simple as a person's problem. Even a pervert like Yong-ji had a bunch of fanatics. She was really bold and had never died before. However, just as Ryuto and Yunyen were chatting about the young lady of the Sai-tu family, the car slowly drove into the school area of Dori First High School. Because the main street was a pedestrian street, vehicles were not allowed to enter. All the vehicles that picked up students could only stop here. When the two of them got out of the car, they happened to see a little beauty, who looked like she was carved out of jade, walk out of the antique classic car that was not far away. Although she was wearing the same uniform as all the students here, no matter what kind of crowd, Sai-tu Dunya was definitely the most eye-catching one. The premise was that her petite body wasn't completely covered by the crowd. As a mixed breed of hairy bear and Shiba Inu, Dunya's skin was so white that it was almost transparent. Her silky silver hair was tied into a cute twin ponytail with a ribbon behind her back. It naturally fell behind her slender waist. Her small and regular facial features, coupled with her emerald eyes, added a kitten-like sharpness and unapproachable feeling to this petite young miss. Overall, if the eldest daughter of the Sai-tu family didn't open her mouth, she would look like a small and exquisite porcelain doll. Unfortunately, she had a mouth that could speak. As Dunya stepped out of the car door, the bodyguard in the car quickly poked his head out and said, "Young lady, remember to press the emergency button immediately if there's anything. We will rush in to protect you at any time. You've said this for the third time today. Do you think I'm the same as you, a pig that has to memorize the words emergency button?" Humph. Hearing this, Dunya stopped for a moment, then turned her head and replied in her clear and sweet voice like a lark. "Right, it's a pity that she has a mouth that can speak. If only she was stuffed with something, such as a mouth ball or something. If it was a normal person, it would be hard to imagine that such a cute little girl like a carved jade would speak such vulgar words." But the bodyguard in the car just nodded as if he was used to it. Well, the sharp-tongued loli was indeed worthy of her reputation. Unless she was in disguise, she would always be sharp-tongued. The vulgar words just now happened to be heard by Ryuto and Yunyen, who were walking over here. The former immediately showed a tacit expression. However, Yunyen, who heard Dunya for the first time, didn't have such a natural expression. Did I hear it wrong? Why would Dunya say that? Probably because she didn't wake up early in the morning, so she's in a bad mood. It's possible. I chatted with her for a while at a banquet before. At that time, she wasn't like this. She was obviously a very polite child. Just as Yunyen recalled the situation when she chatted with Dunya at that time, the girl with white hair and double ponytails who just said vulgar words seemed to have noticed Yunyen and Ryuto behind. The moment she saw Yunyen, Dunya first frowned slightly, and then the muscles on her face quickly twisted, and she immediately put on a calm and elegant, fake smile of a young lady. Chapter 92. In the Great Motherland, there is an art called face changing. It is said that an expert can change his face in 0.5 seconds. Although everyone knows that Dunia can't change her face, her speed of changing her face at this time is not slower than a professional face-changing actor. Oh, isn't this Yunyan? Guyan, it's really a bright morning. After changing into the big Miss face, Dunia walked with a calm smile, elegantly walked in front of Dunia, and nodded slightly to her. The first rule of the big Miss: use honorifics when talking, even if it's a little redundant, don't care. The second rule of the eldest Miss: when you speak, you have to lengthen your sentences and slow down your pace to create a steady and elegant image. The third rule of the big Miss: when talking, you must be dignified and quiet, virtuous and elegant, don't look sideways, face natural, back straight, hands in front of the body. If only from the perspective of the assessment, Dunia's big Miss style, at this time, can be said to be quite standard. But after hearing the vulgar words of this big Miss Sai-tu before, no matter who it is, they will feel that at this time she is very fake. From a street shrew to an elegant big Miss, Dunia really changed too fast. It's like after getting on a car, the car sped up to 200 kilometers per hour. So Yunyan, who saw all this with her own eyes, was also shocked by her. She could only nod and ask as calmly as possible, "Dunia, san, long time no see, are you coming to school today?" "Yes, I heard that Dori First High School has a simple spirit, so I asked my father to let me transfer here. I hope I didn't cause any trouble to you." Speaking of this, Dunia bowed slightly again. The smile and expression on her face were always very gentle. But when hearing her pure nonsense, Ryuto's mouth couldn't help but twitch. What did she mean by asking her father to transfer schools because she heard that the school was simple and honest, and that there were many talents here? It was clearly because she had beaten up a few hooligans in her original school that she had no choice but to transfer schools, okay? According to Ryuto's understanding in the game, the reason for Dunia's transfer was simple. She had originally studied in a private aristocratic academy. That's right, it was the kind that specialized in nurturing aristocratic young ladies. Not long ago, when Dunia and her friends went out shopping, they met a few hooligans. Those hooligans flirted with them, so Dunia took action. That beating made those hooligans kneel on the ground and kowtow to beg for mercy. It was the kind of beating that was almost stuffed into an urn. However, even though she enjoyed the beating, the school found out about her violent behavior, and Dunia was criticized and punished. "Principal, I didn't do anything wrong. Why are you punishing me?" Saito classmate, our White Lotus Women's Academy aims to cultivate virtuous girls. How can there be virtuous girls who beat up others on the street? Then a virtuous lady deserves to be taken advantage of? She can't fight back even if she is insulted? If someone is rude, then you can just turn around and leave. Why bother with those hooligans? F*CKU. What? Saito classmate, you just said. I said F*CKU. If being a virtuous lady means I have to swallow my anger, then I don't want to be a virtuous lady. Boom. At the end of the legend, Dunia smashed the table in front of the principal with one punch, scaring the old principal to the point that he lost control of his bladder. Since she had done such an outrageous thing, she definitely couldn't stay in this White Lotus Women's Academy anymore. This was also the reason why Dunia transferred to this first high school. At this moment, while she was pretending to be a virtuous young lady with Yunyan, Dunia was actually thinking this in her heart. So annoying. I just don't want to meet someone I know. Although Yunyan isn't bad, I feel that it's tiring to be with this kind of virtuous young lady. Looking at Yunyan, who was completely different from her, 100% pure and without any pretense, Dunia felt very puzzled. She originally thought that she could escape from that virtuous young lady hell. Who knew that she would meet such a virtuous young lady after transferring? That's too bad. But when she finally noticed Ryuto at the side, Dunia finally curled her lips. Wait, who is this kid? Why is he going to school with Yunyan? Could it be that he was her servant? But what the hell is this blonde? Super tasteless. Although he's a bit handsome, I feel like there's something wrong with his head. Dunya secretly looked at Ryuto and immediately defined him as a super tasteless idiot handsome guy. But on the surface, she still politely smiled at Ryuto and said, "Hello, I'm Saitu Dunya. Nice to meet you." When he saw the faint contempt in Dunya's eyes, Ryuto grinned. "I'm Ryuto Kiryo, Dori First High School, and the worst student in Tokyo. Nice to meet you." It had to be said that Ryuto's self-introduction was very simple and very detailed. "Ryuto Kiryo? Isn't that the extreme Dao young master? Is it him?" Although Dunya had been studying in a boarding school in the suburbs of Tokyo, she should have heard of this name. After all, whether it was on the internet or in other people's conversations, the rumors related to this extreme Dao young master were always very impressive. But because the rumors were somewhat distorted, Dunya always thought that Ryuto was the kind of person who was 8 feet tall, 8 feet waist, fists bigger than a pot, and had a scar like the Big Dipper on his chest and a chivalrous traveler tattoo on his back. She didn't expect that the real person was so much more normal than the rumors. He looked like a normal person. It was really disappointing. After secretly disappointed with Ryuto's overly normal behavior, Dunya pretended to be a young lady and walked with Yunyen to the school gate. It had to be said that at this time, the scene of the two beauties walking together was like a painting. Yunyen was tall, her brows were soft, and her brown hair was tied into a single ponytail. She gave people the feeling of a gentle big sister. Dunya was petite, her facial features were delicate, and her silver-white hair was tied into 2 ponytails behind her. She gave people the feeling of a cute little sister. From various angles, the two beauties formed a sharp contrast. It could be said that they each had their own characteristics. Such a beautiful scene, the surrounding students naturally couldn't help but look over, but after a glance, most of them quickly turned around and didn't dare to look again. The culprit that caused this situation was naturally Ryuto Kiryo walking behind Yunyen and Dunya. The culprit, Ryuto Kiryo. It was a really good title. Ryuto liked it when people called him that. But at this time, his attention was actually all on Dunya's exaggerated and bizarre attributes. Why exaggerated and bizarre to describe it? Because Dunya's attributes were like this: name, Saitu Dunya, age, 15 years old, attributes, wisdom LV1, vitality LV4, courage LV3, insight LV1, charm LV2. That's right, Dunya's vitality actually reached the level of LV4, international warrior. Because this little loli had an extremely rare, superhuman physique, or supergirl physique. Chapter 93. From the day she was born, Dunya was so different. This difference didn't come from her father, who was the world's top martial artist, nor did it come from her mother, who was the world's top dancer. It was completely a God-given talent. From a general medical point of view, a newborn baby's birth weight was mostly 5 to 8 pounds, but Dunya was born with 20 pounds, which made her mother think that she was pregnant with twins or triplets. This abnormal weight didn't mean that the baby was particularly big, but the muscle density in her body was extremely high, which was equivalent to dozens of times the value of an ordinary person. Such a strange symptom, in modern medicine, was called superhuman physique. It was a special physique that could only appear in 1 out of hundreds of millions of people. Dunya, who grew up with such a special physique, actually contained a terrifying strength in her seemingly slender body. This was also the reason why Dunya's 5 measurements had the strange attribute of LV4 physique. International warrior. Indeed, if only looking at the physical ability, Dunya was even comparable to Tenmu Ayam. They were both monsters that could crush human bones like candy. However, compared to Ayam's ruthlessness, Dunya had been hiding her special superhuman physique. She had never even used her real strength on humans to avoid causing an irreversible tragedy. Just like when Dunya beat up those hooligans, she had to restrain herself a lot to avoid turning those hooligans into a pile of broken body parts in front of everyone. Good heavens, I don't even know if I can beat her now. She's simply a little monster. While walking behind Dunya, Ryuto looked at her petite body from top to bottom. It seemed that it was hard to imagine where this guy's strange strength came from. Although, Ryuto was just curious about how strong Dunia's body was, so he quietly followed behind and stared at the little girl's body. However, from the third-person perspective of the onlookers, this guy looked like a pervert who had taken a fancy to this cute girl with top-notch looks and was tailing her forcefully. Should we call the police? On the road less than 300 meters away from the main gate of Dori No. 1 High School, countless students who were walking by with their heads lowered or turned their heads away all had the same thought. He looked at Warner, who seemed to be sizing up his target with the typical criminal gaze. Look at the weird uncle swaggering behind the two beauties. She looked at Na's shameless expression as if he didn't feel that he was doing something bad. Therefore, early in the morning, many people had already silently held their phones in their hands, ready to call 110 for emergency help at any time to prevent the two beauties from unfortunately falling into the hands of the devil. Especially the little girl who had just transferred in today. She looked like a pure and cute human doll. If she was bullied by that bastard Ryuto Kiryu, she would definitely cry pitifully. Once they thought of Dunia silently crying after being bullied, the surrounding students couldn't help but feel heartbroken. Of course, if they were told that this pure and cute little girl could punch Ryuto's brain out of his nostrils, no one would believe it. Thus, when the group of students looked at Dunia as if they were looking at the unlucky heroine who had been possessed by something dirty, Dunia herself was very confused. What's going on? Why are they looking at me with a mixture of pity, sadness, and helplessness? Is there something wrong with their heads? For Dunia, who had just transferred to this school, she still couldn't understand how the words Ryuto Kiryu could be equated with scum. Naturally, she didn't understand why she would encounter such gazes. For a moment, Dunia, who was walking, felt uncomfortable all over. After all, she had never experienced being stared at by a group of people so early in the morning. It made her feel as if she was walking to the execution ground. However, in this strange atmosphere where two great beauties were walking in front, followed by a jinxed evil spirit, and surrounded by a group of people who were ready to call the police at any time, two beautiful figures coincidentally rushed over from the other side of the road, making the already chaotic situation even more chaotic. Young mistress, the atmosphere over there seems to be a little strange. Something's happened. Although they were several dozen meters away, as Kanzaki Colored Glaze's bodyguard, 16 Nights Dancing Costume, Kanzaki's Colored Glaze, was still able to sharply sense the burning air. The students' eyes were filled with uneasiness and panic, and many of them were unconsciously holding their phones in their hands, as if they didn't know where to go. This situation was very similar to when Dancing Costume followed Bunnyball Sensei to the battlefield to experience the tense atmosphere. Was this a battlefield? Why did the school's entrance become a battlefield so early in the morning? Why were they all holding their phones with guns drawn? Were they all crazy? Just as Dancing Costume was puzzled by the strange situation, she first saw Yunyen Tsukimi and Dunia Saito walking out from the crowd, followed by Ryuto Kiryu. In about a second, she understood everything. This Komiyoshi's samurai couldn't help but smile bitterly. That seems to be the young mistress of the Saito family. I didn't expect that she would be targeted by Ryuto the moment she transferred over. She's quite unlucky. Unlucky. Heh, it doesn't seem like anyone is the unlucky one. But when Dancing Costume looked at Dunia with sad eyes, the colored glaze on the side snorted and wanted to go around them. If there was anyone in this school who could see through Dunia's true colors, it would be the colored glaze. If Dunia was a little fox who had muscles all over her body and was trying to disguise herself with lace, then Lu Li would be an old fox who had long become a demon and no longer needed to disguise herself. Therefore, how could this young mistress of the Saito family hide from Colored Glaze's eyes? That little brat's pretentious attitude, it was better not to have anything to do with her. Moreover, Yunyen and Ryuto were also here, it was better to leave first. When Colored Glaze noticed that the situation was not right, she wanted to quickly leave without hesitation. However, although her brain was good and her eyes were sharp, the speed of turning around was a bit slow. Ah, isn't that Colored Glaze classmate? Good morning. Before Colored Glaze could sneak away, Yunyan, who was walking not far away, had already noticed her, and then waved and greeted her in front of everyone. "Are you kidding me? Why do you have to call me at this time? Can't you see the atmosphere, natural idiot?" After hearing Yunyan's words, Colored Glaze, who originally planned to run, could only awkwardly turn around and wave at the strange trio with a smile, but she couldn't stop cursing in her heart. Chapter 94. When the Colored Glaze also walked over with a smile, all the surrounding students were in an uproar. Good heavens, what was going on this morning? How could they see the dreamy scene of three great beauties gathered together? In this first high school, Yunyan and the Colored Glaze were already quite famous for being the second and third year school belles. At this moment, with the arrival of Dunia, the originally empty position of the first year school belles also had an owner. All of a sudden, the school belles of First High School were gathered together. What's more, these three great beauties each had their own unique characteristics. When they stood together, it was as if flowers bloomed in the surrounding space out of thin air. The air also became fragrant and sweet. It was a pity that in this three flowers gathering beauties, there was an extremely annoying stinky blonde standing in the way. Under the gazes of many people who were angry but did not dare to speak, Ryuto stood there leisurely and even waved at the Colored Glaze. In the eyes of everyone, this scene was as if three roses, lilies, and chrysanthemums had gathered together to compete for beauty, but there was a big-mouth man-eating flower beside them that was ready to make a move. What kind of broken thing was this? If an artist dared to draw such a picture of hell, then that artist would definitely be dragged out and drowned in a pig cage. Of course, as the big-mouth man-eating flower, Ryuto naturally did not react to the angry gazes of the others. He was only worried about what might happen in a while. Well, the Colored Glaze also came. They wouldn't quarrel on the spot, would they? When Ryuto saw Yunyan call the Colored Glaze over, he couldn't help but smile bitterly, as if he had already predicted what would happen next. Among the three female leads, Yunyan was a natural good person and lubricant for the team, so she could get along with anyone. However, the attributes and personalities of the other two were seriously incompatible. After all, Colored Glaze was a strategist while Dunia was a general. One relied on intelligence while the other relied on strength. In the first place, it was easy for one to get along with the other, not to mention that Dunia was willful and liked to put on an act. Colored Glaze could see through her at a glance, so it would be strange if they got along well. On the other hand, Dunia was not used to seeing Colored Glaze, who was a classic lady from every angle. She also felt that Colored Glaze was too fake, and she was fake from head to toe. Therefore, when the two of them were about to meet, this was what they were thinking. Colored Glaze, humph, what a fake young lady. It's a pity that you're not good enough at pretending. You don't know what you're talking about. Dunia, humph, this woman is obviously scheming. She's definitely not a good person. However, although both of them thought so, they naturally couldn't openly express their disgust in public. Therefore, Colored Glaze walked up to Dunia and said with a perfect smile, "Hello, Dunia-san. Nice to meet you. I'm Kanzaki Colored Glaze. Nice to meet you." Dunia also covered her mouth and pretended to be surprised as she replied, "Ah, are you Colored Glaze-san? I've heard so much about you. I didn't expect to meet you here. Dunia-san, you're new here. If you need any help, please don't hesitate to ask. No need to be polite. Is that so? Thank you very much. I just transferred here and felt a little nervous, but with Colored Glaze-san and Yunyan-san here, there's nothing to be afraid of." Hee. Humph, humph, humph. What's going on? Why do I feel like they're not having a normal conversation? On the surface, Colored Glaze and Dunia's conversation didn't seem like there was anything wrong with it. It was just normal social talk. However, some of the more sensitive students around them also keenly felt the strange atmosphere that pervaded their bodies. How should they describe this feeling? It was just like in a palace drama. The Empress and the new concubine clearly didn't like each other and wanted to strangle each other, but they had to pretend to be harmonious in front of the Emperor. And that Emperor was this Ryuto-sama. When he thought about how the three beauties in front of him were all part of his harem, Ryuto felt like he was really awesome. Thus, he couldn't help but put his hands on his waist and puffed out his chest. He stood beside the three beauties and put on an arrogant posture that said, "Look, this is my harem." However, in the eyes of others, this posture was, "Are you crazy? The three beauties are standing together and chatting. Why is a monster like you posing on the side?" Fortunately, this degree of visual torture quickly passed. Under Union's lead, Dunia and Colored Glaze also pretended to chat as they walked into the school. That morning, the first high BBS forum naturally erupted into an intense vortex of posts. With the transfer of the first-year beauty Saito to Gunia, Dori First High School finally had its own School Beauty Miyako. At the same time, because of Dunia's prominent identity, in just a few short hours, her background was posted on the forum. Most people had a preliminary understanding of this ancient martial arts family's young miss. Of course, the things that happened in the White Lotus Girls' Academy before were not exposed. After all, it was a semi-closed aristocratic girls' academy. The things inside rarely spread to the outside. Originally, Ryuto didn't have any thoughts about Dunia's transfer for the time being. At most, he planned to talk to her when he was free. Who knew that when he was eating with Colored Glaze at noon, Ryuto unexpectedly heard new information. Colored Glaze picked up a cup of tea, took a sip gracefully, and said inadvertently, "Recently, the Psi-2 Guild Hall and the Heavenly Eye Group seem to be in conflict. The conflict between the two sides is intensifying." "What? There's such a thing?" Hearing this, Ryuto put down the chopsticks in his hand and asked in a surprised tone. In the third storyline of the original work, the Psi-2 Guild Hall and the Heavenly Eye Group did frequently have conflicts in the middle and later stages, but it was still early. Why did these two forces suddenly fight when it was still early? It is said that it was caused by an Augusta Westland AW-101 helicopter. Helicopter? Augusta Westland AW-101? When Ryuto heard this model, he couldn't help but touch his head, because he seemed to be familiar with this model. According to Colored Glaze, about a week ago, there was a helicopter belonging to the Heavenly Eye Group flying randomly in Yoto. Just when the helicopter was flying at a low altitude, the wind pressure shattered the glass of a Psi-2 martial arts hall, and the glass accidentally scratched the face of the curator's wife. Therefore, the curator angrily called a group of people to chase after the plane. When the plane landed at a maintenance point in the suburbs to resupply, they caught the pilot, beat him up, and smashed the plane into pieces. Although I don't know why the helicopter was sent, the helicopter was smashed, and the pilot was severely disabled. Heavenly Eye was said to be furious, so they turned around to deal with the Psi-2 martial arts hall. Why do you have this expression? After Colored Glaze explained the conflict between the Heavenly Eye Group and the Psi-2 Guild Hall, she saw a strange expression on Ryuto's face, so she couldn't help but ask in confusion. Chapter 95. It's nothing. I just feel that the people from the Psi-2 Guild Hall are really fierce. That's right. Although they're just a private organization, they have a lot of connections in the political and business circles. They also have hundreds of thousands of disciples in the country. They're quite powerful. With Colored Glaze's intelligence gathering and leadership ability, she naturally knew how deep the background of the private organization, Psi-2 Martial Arts Hall, was. The ancestors of that group of martial artists were professional martial artists who were responsible for protecting the daimyo and senior officials. Although they left the officialdom in modern times to form their own organization, they still maintained a deep relationship with various organizations. It was not surprising that such a large force dared to challenge the Heavenly Eye Group, although Colored Glaze did not think that they could deal with Heavenly Eye. After all, in Colored Glaze's view, the Psi-2 Guild Hall belonged to the stubborn conservative group. Although they were powerful, their thinking was rigid, and they still maintained their ancient style in this era. Ancient style and rigid thinking. No matter how strong such a force was, in Iam's eyes, it was no different from a pile of unrecyclable garbage. If Iam really wanted to do something to the Psi-2 Guild Hall, her various vicious methods were definitely unimaginable to the conservative group of martial artists. They could not deal with it, and the Saito family would inevitably suffer some losses. However, compared to Color Glaze's thoughts, Ryuto was thinking about another thing at this time, and that was the origin of the Saito Guild Hall, beating up the Heavenly Eye Group's pilot and angrily dismantling the Augusta Westland AW-101 helicopter. First of all, this special event absolutely did not happen in Red Album 2. No one survived. The only reason why it happened was because of Ryuto's survival. Because Ryuto did not die in the Tokyo Bay warehouse, IM sent people to the school to catch him in a helicopter. Augusta Westland AW-101 Inch was the helicopter that kidnapped Ryuto to the unrestrained Sky Tower. At the same time, because Ryuto had backtracked and killed the mercenaries sent to capture him, the only survivor of the helicopter pilot could only escape in a sorry state. Perhaps due to the severe psychological pressure caused by the failure to complete the mission, the driver somehow lost his mind and broke the glass of the Saito clubhouse. The broken glass cut the curator's wife's face. As a result, the pilot was beaten up and the plane was torn to pieces, causing the Chenmu Group and the Saito Club to fall out in advance. Alright. The two organizations that had been minding their own business for the time being actually started fighting because of me. What a huge butterfly reaction. After understanding everything, Ryuto didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Obviously, because he was alive and kicking, the timeline of this game world was rapidly changing. But fortunately, the Saito Club angered IM, which caused IM to temporarily look away from Ryuto. Before, Ryuto was wondering why no one came to mess with him in this week. Now it seemed that IM had focused her attention on the Saito Club. Suddenly, Ryuto also realized why the driver and bodyguard who escorted Dunya to school this morning was so nervous. "Miss, remember to press the emergency contact button immediately if there is anything. We will rush in to protect you at any time." From the words of the bodyguard, it should be that Dunya's father knew that the Chenmu Group might play some dirty tricks, such as kidnapping Dunya, so he strengthened her security work and alert level. But no matter what, this was a matter between the two big forces for the time being. It was not Ryuto's turn to care for the time being. Anyway, he still had to eat and play. He slept in the familiar second-class B to replenish his energy and wait for the arrival of the night. Around 8 o'clock that night, in the nightfall of Tokyo, a car sped across the spacious road. The person driving in front was Ryuto's right-hand man, Narukai Otani, and their destination was Union's home. The Tsutsumira Betsuin, where the miss of the Tsutsumira Betsuin lived, was located in the port area of Tokyo. It was very close to Dori Daiichi High School. It was a distance that could be reached quickly by walking, but she would still be escorted by an exclusive vehicle every day. Not long after, the black car slowly drove into the wealthy area filled with mansions and courtyards. It stopped half a street away from the Tsutsumira Betsuin. When they were nearby, Long Do got out of the car and slowly walked over, sticking close to the wall like a thief. According to the map given by Yunyen, I should wait for her here? When he came to the side of the Tsutsumira Betsuin, near an inconspicuous iron fence, Ryuto looked at the map on his phone again and confirmed that there was no problem with the location to pick up Yunyen. According to the discussion with Yunyen today, she would sneak out of here at around 8:30, get in Ryuto's car and go to the Ginza Mokome to find Furamaki Sotaro for the assessment. Speaking of which, can senior sister Yunyen really come out of here? The fence is 3 meters high. Looking at the fence that was so high that even he didn't dare to say that he could casually climb over it, and there were spikes protecting it, Ryuto couldn't help but feel a little doubtful. But after he waited for a few minutes, a graceful figure quietly ran towards him, accompanied by the cool night breeze. It was senior sister Yunyen. However, she wasn't wearing her usual uniform. Instead, she was wearing sportswear that made it easier for her to move around. Furthermore, her cloud-like soft brown hair was tied into a refreshing ponytail. When Long Do saw senior sister Yunyen, he felt as if spring had arrived. It was as if the air around him had become fresher. Yunyen also ran to the fence under Ryuto's gaze, waved and smiled. "Sorry, did you wait long?" Looking at her cheerful appearance, she was like a girl who sneaked out to go on a date with her boyfriend. This made Ryuto nod his head first, then quickly reacted and shook his head. "It's okay, I just got here. How do you plan to get out of here?" Actually, there is a bit of a problem with the fence." Yunyen smiled and came to the edge of the fence. She stretched out her hand and pushed one of the seemingly solid but actually loose railings, pushing out a gap of about 30 centimeters. Then she squeezed her soft body toward the gap, twisting left and right, and slowly squeezing out of the gap. Originally, Yunyen's escape method was not a problem. The problem was, well, she had a good figure, and she was wearing a tight-fitting sportswear. So when she squeezed through the railing, the two soft and towering slimes in front of Yunyen's chest showed a wonderful shape under the pressure of the railing. Especially when the slime on the right squeezed through the railing, and together with the slime on the left, the cylindrical railing was sandwiched between the two peaks. This scene was simply a killer move for men. "Okay, Ryuto classmate, let's go. What's wrong with you?" After Yunyen finally squeezed her body out, she looked at Ryuto, who was squatting on the ground with his hands covering his face. She seemed to be a little puzzled by his sudden change. "No. It's nothing, just a little low blood sugar. Wasn't this too natural? Was this person trying to murder for money?" After a few seconds, Ryuto could not help but sigh, quickly stood up and walked toward the car with Yunyen. Chapter 96. The Ginza, at night, exuded a charming and colorful light. Red, green, yellow, and colorful, all kinds of signs competed with each other at the intersection, and the door to attract customers was also constantly wandering in the crowd. "Wow, is this the entertainment street at night? It looks so special." Yunyen, who was sitting in the back seat with Ryuto, excitedly looked at the scene she had never seen before, and her pretty face almost stuck to the window. In the past many years of life, Yunyen had never been allowed to go shopping at night, let alone come to this kind of place, so it was not difficult to understand why she would feel excited. When they came to the alley where they learned from Furamaki, Ryuto ordered, "Narrate, stop here. Second-generation head, this area is full of fish and dragons. If you want to take Miss Yunyen with you, it's best to disguise yourself." Before getting out of the car, Narrate looked at Yunyen's inexperienced appearance and couldn't help but remind her. Insiders clearly knew that Tokyo at night was a devil's den, especially in the streets and alleys. No one could guarantee what ghosts they would encounter at the corner. Yunyen, who wore sportswear, had pure eyes, and an innocent expression, was definitely the kind of person who was most likely to get into trouble in Tokyo's devil's den at night. "I know. Yunyen, come and put this on." Ryuto was naturally very clear about this kind of thing, so before getting out of the car, he deliberately took out a mask and a hat and handed it over. The mask could cover most of Yunyen's appearance, and the hat could also stuff all the cloud-like soft hair, so it was almost foolproof. Wow, this is really fresh." After covering most of her peerless appearance and temperament, Yunyen followed Ryuto into the depths of the alley. Yunyen looked around at the eerie alleys on both sides. It was her first time here and she couldn't help but look around curiously. Ryuto taught him as he walked, "Just turn your eyes left and right and observe your surroundings. Don't move your head around. If you reveal that you're a novice in the dark alley, you'll be targeted easily at night." Is that so? Also, it's best to stick your hands into the bag as much as possible and pretend that you're ready to grab something." "I see. This is common knowledge in the underground world." As Yunyen followed Ryuto through the alleys, she quickly wrote down the underground knowledge that might be useful for her writing. Not long after, the two of them arrived at the empty space in the alley where Ryuto and Furamaki had learned Furamaki-style martial arts. At this moment, Furamaki Sotaro seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. His back was facing the entrance of the alley, and his hands were behind his back. He was posing like an otherworldly expert. If I didn't come, he wouldn't have planned to stand like this for the whole night, right? Seeing Furamaki addicted to showing off, Ryuto couldn't help but have the worst thoughts. After hearing Ryuto's footsteps, Furamaki, who was dozing off with his back facing Ryuto, immediately said without turning his head, "You're here?" "Aha, I'm here. Since you can come here, it means that you must be very confident in yourself. You can... Hey, who is this?" Originally, Taro Gu-mu had intended to make a dashing turn around halfway through his speech to show off his master's lofty attitude in front of Ryudo. However, the moment he turned around, he was stunned. Because when he turned around halfway, he saw a slim figure standing beside Ryuto. "Looks like a girl? Are you kidding me? It's the middle of the night, and you brought a girl out to participate in the martial arts exam?" As if she felt Furamaki Sotaro's surprise, Yunyen also quickly smiled and said, "Master Furamaki, hello, my name is Yunyen Tsukimi. I'm very interested in the martial arts exam, so I asked Ryuto classmate to bring me along. I hope I won't disturb you too much." As Yunyen spoke, she bowed to Furamaki. Her etiquette was flawless, and coupled with her god-level charm, it made it impossible for people to speak ill of her. "This woman is very dangerous. Yunyen had the same level of charm as I am. If used properly, it was not impossible for her to become a demoness that could bring disaster to a country." Furamaki Sotaro saw through this at a glance. After realizing that this woman was not simple, the old man walked over to Ryuto, who was standing next to him, and whispered seriously in his ear, "You have a girlfriend?" "We're just friends, or, temporarily, just friends. Let me give you a word of advice. The water here is too deep. You may not be able to grasp it." Although Furamaki Sotaro's words sounded like he was driving an old car, in fact, he was sincerely reminding his back. After all, being together with Yunyen would really lead to countless troubles. However, Ryuto replied with a smile, "It's okay, I don't need these 100 or 200 troubles. I'll just deal with whatever comes my way." "You're really brave, but I don't know if your strength is worthy of your courage." After understanding Ryuto's determination, Sotaro took 2 steps back and said in a voice that even Yunyen could hear, Could it be that it's about to start?" After feeling the seriousness that quickly spread out from Sotaro's body, Yunyen couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. She looked at the master and disciple nervously and excitedly. Ryuto also casually rolled up the sleeves of his shirt and asked faintly, "Is it starting here?" "My opponent is you?" "No, your opponent is not here. It's in the Sai River Plain Underground Fighting Arena." "The Sai River Plain Underground Fighting Arena?" When he heard this familiar name, Ryuto's eyebrows slightly raised. Not long ago, when he was talking with Furamaki Sotaro about the past of his father Kazuma, he once talked about how Kazuma once swept the largest underground fighting arena in Tokyo. And the fighting arena that Kazuma set the record of 100 wins and no losses was called the Sai River Plain Underground Fighting Arena. So that's how it is. Furamaki wants me to challenge the underground fighting world that Kazuma's father once swept? Ryuto once heard that there were some underground non-formal fighting competitions in Tokyo. There were no rules, no sex, as long as no weapons were used, it was a primitive bloody fighting. Rather than a fighting competition, this kind of competition was more like a slaughter. Because there were no rules, the contestants often went up alive and came down dead. So those who would appear in these competitions were either retired fighters from the surface world, or rogues, fugitives, mercenaries or similar outlaws. However, the first trial that Furamaki Sotaro gave Ryuto was to challenge the Sai River Plain Underground Fighting Arena, where people died every day, and defeat the opponent in the sea-level competition. Chapter 97. Racing River Plains Underground Fighting Arena. It's not hard to understand the fighting arena, but what kind of place is Racing River Plain? Is there such a street in Tokyo? It doesn't sound very auspicious. After listening to the trial conditions of the old man Furamaki, Yunyen first nodded and then asked doubtfully. In ancient mythological records, after people died, they would go to the River of Three Roads, and ride the death god's boat from the shore to the opposite shore. And this shore area where the death god's boat was called Saihara. In other words, This place was the last stop on the way to the other shore, and the closest place to the underworld. Such an inauspicious name, it was hard to imagine who would use this name to name an area. Otherwise, if you took a taxi home at night and the taxi driver asked you where you lived and you replied, "Go to Sai-Herrera," you would scare the driver to death and think there was a ghost. But in fact, Sai-Herrera was a mysterious place that only a few people in Tokyo knew about. It was equivalent to an urban legend. It was said that somewhere in Tokyo's West Park, there was an abandoned subway station. Because of the surrounding expansion, the subway station was surrounded in the gap between the public toilet and the park, but for some reason, it was not completely demolished. Therefore, the homeless who often wandered in the park occupied this place. They occupied this abandoned area that was said to be no less than the West Park itself. And under the leadership of the Tokyo homeless boss, Sai-Herrera merchant, the homeless transformed this place into an underground amusement park for the rich. It was said that after walking into the abandoned subway entrance, what greeted the eyes was a bustling scene like an ancient red light street. The narrow road of only about 10 meters was paved with a bright red carpet. Red oil paper umbrellas were placed on the ground every few meters, exuding an antique atmosphere. Small pink lanterns were hung at the door of the wooden houses built on both sides. From the outside, one could see that inside the half-covered room, there were many women wearing kabuki costumes and heavy makeup. If one wanted to accurately describe the style of this Sai-Herrera underground street district, it was as if the customs of the Edo period hundreds of years ago were presented, giving people a feeling of time and space reversal. However, most of the people walking on this street were wearing masks and expensive suits. They looked like rich men with greasy hair and powdered faces. This made people jump out of the fun of the Edo period and return to the dirtier modern world. Was this the legendary Saiji River original underground street district? The construction was quite decent. Not long after, Long-Do and Yun-Yen walked through many small alleys under the lead of Taro Gu-mu. In the end, they even went around a public toilet and a park. Finally, they passed through the abandoned subway and arrived here. Even Ryuto was dazzled by the magnificent underground world. Yun-Yen was so excited that she almost screamed. She stretched out her trembling hand and pointed at a red oil paper umbrella in the corner not far away. There was a bed under the umbrella. Suddenly, Yun-Yen asked in an excited tone, "Ryuto, what is that for?" "This should be for passers-by to rest, right?" Long-Do scratched his head and said uncertainly, "Wow, I have never seen a roadside rest area like this. Ryuto, come and sit." Therefore, Yun-Yen skipped towards the red paper umbrella. She even pulled Long-Do to sit down with her. She wanted to take out her phone and take a beautiful picture of them first. However, old Master Gu-mu walked over and reminded her with a smile, "Indeed, it's for passers-by to rest. However, it's not an ordinary rest. It's for the wanderers and customers of the Edo period to do business. You girls and guests?" Hearing this, Long-Do was so scared that his scalp went numb. However, Yun-Yen still asked curiously, "What do wanderers do?" "Perform." "Not perform but sell their bodies." Sell their bodies." Wanderers are known as prostitutes in ancient times. They sometimes have sex with customers under the red oil paper umbrella by the roadside to attract more customers to continue their business. Sell their bodies? Prostitutes? Have sex? Do business? Suddenly, Yun-Yen looked at the red oil paper umbrella above her head, then looked at herself and Ryuto sitting on the bed. Her brain couldn't process such interesting information in a short time. 3 seconds later, Yun-Yen blushed and quickly pulled Ryuto up from the bed. At the same time, she completely deleted the photo in her phone. Seeing her embarrassed state, Ryuto couldn't help but ask with a smile, "Yun-Yen, are you okay?" I'm okay, but this is too strange? On the side of the street? Don't they feel embarrassed?" Actually, Yun-Yen didn't know about the existence of the wanderer profession. But the roadside mattress and the oil paper umbrella were still beyond her knowledge. "Well, it's good that you don't understand, because it just means that your life is very happy. Facing Yunyen's incredulous question, Ryuto patted her on the shoulder and explained with a smile. For a lady like her who was born in a privileged family and never had to worry about money, let alone starving, selling her body for money was obviously a very shameful thing. But for those who were abandoned on the side of the road at birth and had nothing but their own body, they were already used to the disdainful transaction in the eyes of ordinary people. In the face of the threat of survival, dignity, they were worthless. This was not only the world of the wanderers, but also the world of those who were not accepted by society, such as extreme Taoists. Everyone living in the underground world had already done their best to survive, and there was absolutely no extra time to care about other things. There was no doubt that such a world was abnormal, but it did exist. Not only in the Edo period, but even in this glamorous modern society, it still existed. After listening to Ryuto's explanation, Yunyen fell into silence for a while. It wasn't that she didn't understand Ryuto's words, but the more she understood, the more she found that she didn't seem to understand anything. Just as Ryuto said, Yunyen's life was very happy. So she didn't experience the hardships of life and didn't experience the bitterness of bowing down for 5 buckets of rice. Perhaps it was because of this ungrounded life experience that caused Yunyen's novel to be completely out of the ordinary. It gave the reader the feeling of a heavenly steed soaring across the sky, flying up into the atmosphere, and then hovering between the sun and Mars. Therefore, for Yunyen, this trip to the Sai River Plain did indeed give her a lot of knowledge. Especially when they arrived at the underground fighting arena where a huge iron cage that looked like a coliseum was placed in the middle. Many rich people were drinking and chatting around it while excitedly cheering for the 2 brawny men in the iron cage, the original fighting arena of the Sai River. Chapter 98. What the hell is this place? When Yunyen followed Ryuto and Sotaro into this dome building that wasn't particularly big, but the atmosphere was much more lively than the outside. Her entire body was almost immobilized by the surging hot wind. The interior of this Sai River fighting arena was like a never-ending lively party. There was never a lack of fierce roars, blood flying all over the sky, the sound of bones breaking, and the rich businessmen, drinks and women around the round tables. This was a venue that was about half the size of a football field. In the middle of the venue, there was a 10-meter wide iron cage. 2 strong men were fighting with their lives on the line. One of the strong men was wearing a wrestler's tight suit. He was desperately trying to hug his opponent and smash him to the ground. But his opponent assumed a very standard boxing posture, dodging with nimble steps while landing heavy punches on the wrestler's body from various angles. When Yunyen had just walked into the arena, she happened to see the wrestler being punched in the cheek by his opponent. A stream of blood flew out along with a broken tooth. This wasn't a movie or a performance. It was a real brawl, or rather a fight. Although Yunyen had just roughly heard about the situation here, but when she really saw such a tragic match, she was still shocked to the point that her legs went numb. Of course, other than Yunyen, who was a newbie, the audience sitting around the cage were roaring excitedly. Beautifully done. Little Tyson. Quickly beat that guy's brains out. Stand up and fight back, Demon Muscle Man. I have bet $1 million on you. Even if you die, you have to win, bastard. Hit him, hit him. Not intense enough. Hit him harder. At this moment, there were no more than 100 people sitting around the round tables. However, the roars and auras of these 100 people were like that of an army with thousands of men and horses. Rich people who had nowhere to spend their money, so they wanted to stimulate to the end. Perverts who couldn't be satisfied in their daily lives and needed to feel their existence through bloody stimulation. There were roaming girls and bodyguards who served these customers, as well as underground warriors who killed each other on the field, exchanging their lives for rewards. The place where these strange guests gathered was the deepest place in the Sai River field. It was only 1 step away from the underworld, the death arena. Yunyen's body couldn't help but tremble when she saw such a place where the sins and desires of human beings were displayed so blatantly. But just when she couldn't stand, Ryuto reached out and held her trembling hand. After holding Yunyen's hand, Ryuto turned his head and gently whispered in her ear, "Don't worry, with me here, you don't have to be afraid of anything. Ahem, I'm not afraid. Suddenly, Yunyan also took a deep breath and responded stubbornly. But even so, she didn't let go of Ryuto's hand. Obviously, she was still a little uncomfortable with this kind of illegal fighting arena and the surrounding chaotic scene. When Yunyan barely calmed down, Furamaki Sotaro on the side said to Ryuto, "What do you think of the strength of the two guys in the ring?" "Very average. It's the standard of an ordinary competition in the surface world. Not a master." It wasn't that Ryuto looked down on the fighters in the surface world, but in fact, in this arena where there were no rules, the fighters in the surface world had a huge inherent disadvantage. The disadvantage was that they only knew how to fight and not kill. If Ryuto understood correctly, the rules of the Sai River field were that there were no rules. As long as they didn't bring weapons, they could do anything. Even if it was stabbing eyes, kicking, or biting the throat, there was no problem. In this case, it was normal for the fighters who were used to fighting in the surface world to lose to the criminal killers who were not as strong as them. After all, the awareness and habits of the two sides when fighting were completely different. The fighters were aiming to win the game, while the criminal killers were aiming to kill. That's right, now it's only a C-level competition, so the strength of both sides is not very strong, and the stakes and bounties are not very high. C-level, then there are higher B-level and A-level ? Yes, your father Kazuma was an A-level here in the past, and he was also the reigning champion. He was also the first person in history to achieve the achievement of undefeated in 100 battles. Undefeated in 100 battles. In such a place with stronger opponents, he had never lost. Seeing the increasingly ferocious battle on the stage, where both sides had already fought until their faces were covered in blood, Long Do couldn't help but imagine the heroic appearance of the one horse when he fought here one after another. He was really an iron-blooded man, a tough guy in a cage, worthy of being the king of 100 battles in the underground arena. So Ryuto couldn't help but laugh. He asked with a smile, "Speaking of which, if you fight here, how much money do you get after winning?" "If it's C-level, it's 10 million, B-level, it's 30 million. If it's A-level, the winner can get 1/10 of the total gambling pool, at least over 100 million. What if I bet on myself to win?" Of course it's not allowed. The fighters are not allowed to participate in any form of betting, even if it's on behalf of friends or relatives. If it's found out, you will be immediately expelled and permanently disqualified. Well, it's really strict. Is it to prevent fake matches? In this case, it should be impossible to make a lot of money by betting on yourself, but it's not bad to make some pocket money by winning the competition and getting a bonus. Gotcha. Just when Ryuto nodded, understanding that he understood the rules here, there was a sudden crisp sound of bones cracking and miserable screams from the cage ring. I admit defeat. I admit defeat. Ryuto looked towards the ring, only to see that the boxer, nicknamed Little Tyson, who had been attacking ferociously, was rolling on the ground while hugging his leg. Below his knee, his leg was in a twisted shape. It didn't look like a human leg, but more like a thick fried dough twist. It was obvious that his opponent used some sort of joint lock to break his knee. But even though the boxer had already shouted to admit defeat, the wrestler who had been beaten black and blue still jumped up mercilessly. That sturdy body that weighed at least 200 kilograms was suddenly pressed down on him. Kaboom! Accompanied by a loud bang, Little Tyson, who was crushed by the jump, spat out a mouthful of blood and fainted, announcing the official end of the match. Is that person still alive? Seeing the cage slowly rise and the medical team carrying Little Tyson away for treatment, Yunyan asked uneasily, "That's none of our business, kid. Go over there and register as a fighter, then request for a last-minute extra match." After watching the thrilling match, Furamaki Sotaro pointed at another tunnel not far away, indicating to Ryuto that it was time for him to go on stage. Chapter 99. Ryuto, are you really going to fight? Fighting in that kind of place? Hearing this, Yunyan realized that they were not here for sightseeing. Ryuto was also going to fight. But when she saw the extremely bloody fight just now, Yunyen quickly pulled Ryuto's clothes, as if she wanted to stop him from doing something stupid. Don't be nervous, those stinky fish and shrimps can't even touch a strand of my hair. You just sit here and admire my heroic appearance. Long Do smiled as he led senior sister Yunyen to an empty table and arranged for her to sit down. He then called for some maids to prepare some wine and food. In the end, Long Do invited old Master Gu Mu to sit here and watch over senior sister Yunyen. Then, he walked towards the contestant passage alone. When he entered the contestant passage, a woman in a professional uniform bowed and asked, "Hello, what can I do for you?" "I want to register as a contestant of the battle arena, and I want to fight immediately." "No problem. Please come here to register your personal information." It seemed that she had seen this kind of unexpected situation many times. The waiter also quickly led Ryuto to register the contestant. But when she saw the name that Ryuto filled in the registration form, the waiter couldn't help but widen her eyes. "Your name is Ryuto Kiryu?" "Yes." "I see, I understand. Please wait in the lounge over there." When Ryuto walked toward the lounge, the information he just filled in was quickly sent to the owner of the battle arena. "So that's the case, Ryuto Kiryu, the son of that guy actually wants to register as a contestant. Hee. Looking at the registration form in his hand, the fat middle-aged man couldn't help but show a nostalgic expression. As everyone knew, the area of Sai River Plain was established by a homeless king named Sai Hana Merchant. At first, he just hired homeless people to collect and sell information, but later, he developed into the king of information in Tokyo. It was said that there was nothing in Tokyo that he didn't know. Of course, if one wanted to buy some kind of information, the price one had to pay was quite shocking. However, from the outside, the florist looked like an ordinary middle-aged gambler. He was wearing a jacket with the word "Sparrow" printed on it and 2 large gold chains hanging in front of his chest. At first glance, one could tell that he was not a decent person. "Boss, is he the real deal?" At this time, a strong black man who handed over the registration form stuttered. This burly black man looked like a tiger with a tiger head and a tiger brain. However, the sturdy muscles on his body and the countless scars on his face warned others that this guy was not an easy opponent to deal with. "Of course it's the real deal. Not long ago, when I got the news that he came in, I thought that this kid was here to have some fun. Who knew that he would give me such a big surprise?" For the flower merchant who had the lifeline of intelligence, he already knew that Ryuto, Yunyen, and Sotaro had come here together. But the flower merchant didn't think that a mere 16-years-old high school student would have the guts to sign up for this battle arena competition. "The younger generation will surpass us in time. As expected of your son, Kazuma." The flower merchant turned his head and looked at the photo on the wall. The man in the photo was holding up a golden belt that represented the king. This was the highest honor that the king of the underground battle arena received after defeating 100 opponents. So the flower merchant quickly picked up the microphone and said to the staff, "Immediately arrange for him to participate in the C-class promotion competition, the sooner the better." "Yes, boss." Following the response from the other side of the microphone, Ryuto's first match, or Group 1, was in the midst of preparations. "What? My match is 3 consecutive matches? I have to defeat 3 opponents in a row?" When he heard the staff's explanation, Ryuto seemed a little surprised. "Yes, because this is the C-class promotion competition, you only need to win these 3 matches to advance to the B-class." "Then if I win these 3 matches, will there be a bonus?" "Of course there will be, a total of 30 million yen, but the premise is that you have to win until the end." "Very good, I'm ready to go at any time." Although it was a bit strange that he could participate in the promotion competition as soon as he came to the battle arena, Ryuto could understand the reason. After all, he was the son of the king of the battle arena, Kazuma Tong. From the perspective of the owner, it was understandable that he was given some preferential treatment. Of course, the promotion competition as soon as he came in could be considered as preferential treatment, or it could be considered as another kind of test. But since the owner here thinks so highly of me, then I won't be polite with the 30 million reward. In this fierce atmosphere, 5 minutes later, Ryuto was invited to the contestant channel, and he walked alone to the center of the ring. As his figure gradually appeared in the ring, the host on top of the stage excitedly shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, now there is a fighter who signed up at the last minute. And his identity is absolutely unimaginable." 10 years ago, an undefeated king of the battle arena returned triumphantly with a golden belt. 10 years later, his son came to inherit his father's position. Let us use the warmest cheers to welcome tonight's promotion competition challenger, the legendary son, Kazuma Tong Ryuto. When this name was shouted by the host, there was a burst of fierce cheers around the ring like a landslide and a tsunami. The heat wave was 100 times more intense than before, as if it was going to lift the round ceiling. Almost everyone at the same time focused their eyes on the young figure who was stepping on the ring, and stood up crazily and shouted, "Really? Is it really him? The legendary second generation of the Rulon group, Ryuto Kiryu?" Seeing the yellow hair on the signboard and the steps that didn't recognize anyone, many people who obviously knew Ryuto immediately cheered while quickly calling their relatives and friends to come and watch this game that might be recorded in history. After all, this was a big news for the entire Sai River Plain, and it might also mean that a new legend was about to start tonight. However, when Ryuto came to the ring, his opponent had already been waiting there for a long time. Seeing the two contestants on the ring, the host also shouted passionately, and the first contestant who is responsible for facing the legendary son in this 3 consecutive matches is the Brazilian wrestler who just won a competition, nicknamed Devil Muscleman, Ivan Bourne. At the other end of the ring, the wrestler Devil Muscleman, whose face was still a little swollen but looked good, and who had just crippled an opponent's leg, showed a fierce expression to Ryuto. You're tuning in to the Narrate and Escape YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.